When they first heard about this thing, it was crew expendable. The next time they sent in Marines, they were expendable too. What makes you think they're gonna care about a bunch of lifers who found God at the ass end of space? You really think they're gonna let you interfere with their plans for this thing? They think we're crud, and they don't give a fuck about one friend of yours that's died. Not one.
I ain't much for begging. Nobody ever gave me nothing. So I say, fuck that thing. Let's fight it.
Fuck it! Let's go for it!
You're listening to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Prater, and I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Patrick R. Green
and Christian Motzka.
Welcome to the show. And today we are here with a guest of ours who's been on the show a couple of times. It's been a long time, probably a couple of years. Probably the last time you were on the show was during our event for Shoal of Orion, which was in 2019. Charles de Lauzirika, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Sure.
We're incredibly excited. Listeners might be going, wait a minute, there's another Alien 3 assembly cut commentary coming right on the heels of the... Well, it's because the person who made the assembly cut reached out to us. He's, as we said, a friend and, a frequent contributor here, and was like, you guys kind of messed a couple things up. I got set the record straight. I got some stuff to say about this. And we're like, oh my God, what, like a once in a lifetime. I mean, it's easy to become desensitized because you're so accessible and so gracious with your time with us. But this is a huge deal for us to be able to watch the, definitive cut of at least for Jamie and myself, our favorite movie with the guy who actually was responsible for getting it into the state that it's in. So welcome back. And I can't wait to watch this with you tonight.
Likewise. And can you really get too much of Alien 3? Is that possible? I think it's almost an impossible task, but thanks for having me. I didn't really want to force it. I just thought, it'd be kind of fun to do some kind of commentary on it with a little bit more added behind the scenes info that might be interesting to people. But, and again, because it's the anniversary, it's a big anniversary for Alien 3, and why not?
Absolutely. So just to let everyone know who you are, Charles is the restoration producer of the assembly cut of Alien 3 and the director of Wreckage and Rage, the behind-the-scenes documentary that is featured on most box sets that you got, or that you would purchase. Certainly the original, which was the Quadrilogy. Was that when you're... No.
Okay, now let's start with the corrections. So the Quadrilogy DVD set has the censored, cut down, edited version of the documentary. It's known on that disc as just the making of Alien 3 because everyone's kind of threw up their hands and walked away from it. The Blu-ray set, the Alien Anthology set, has the uncensored, uncut, complete Wreckage and Rage, making Alien 3. And that is the full version. Plus, it comes with an hour plus more of these, what we call enhancement pods, which are kind of like deleted scenes from the documentary. So, it's like 4 hours almost of Alien 3 behind the scenes coolness.
That's awesome.
Can I ask, before we get into this thing that we're all here for tonight, did you have anything to do with the mother mode stuff?
I did. No, that was all the Alien Anthology set was this big, huge project that, crossed all 4 films, went all the way back into the archival materials that existed previously, stuff on the shelf we pulled down, stuff that hadn't been seen in a while, we put back on the set. And then, I worked with this company called Trailer Park. So the mastermind of Mother Mode is this guy named Troy Benjamin, who's really a big Alien fanatic, as we all were who were working on it. And he had this idea to create sort of a way to access different types of content, different types of information that was spread out throughout this encyclopedic box set. And so between Troy and then Raleigh Stewart, who designed the menus and also graphically worked with Mother Mode, and then just a ton of other people, that were a part of this process. It was, it really was an epic production, and I'm so glad it just kind of, came together in a way that I think people seem to like, because that was kind of like our third-ish time of biting the apple of this one. It's like there was the Alien Legacy set, which was like, baby steps. There was the Quadrilogy set, which was like a big step forward. And then this was like, I think, the final step in many ways. So it was, that was a really interesting interactive mode, I think, for the box. I don't know if most people even know how to use, but it's there if they want to figure it out.
I feel like commentary tracks and behind the scenes documentaries, especially to the degree that you did them, are not happening anymore. And so I'm especially happy that you're here today to do this, because we're capturing something that isn't anywhere else. You saying how you went through and did these things, it's going to be awesome. I just can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, hopefully I remember everything correctly. It has been, as we discussed off camera earlier, it's been 20 years almost since the Quadrilogy set, which I really find hard to believe, but it'll be fun to go down memory lane with a really uplifting movie like Alien 3, especially.
Well, let's do it. Jamie, you want to give us our countdown here?
Okay, everyone. So we are going to count down from 3, 2, 1 to start the movie, and we'll get right into this. So 3, 2, 1, start.
So yeah, right off the bat, we've got this great alternate fanfare, right, of the Fox fanfare that you guys mentioned you thought was the first time it had been, tweaked or played with. It might be the first time for the fanfare, but it's not the first time for the Fox logo. And I don't even know what the first time was, but I do remember the Cannonball Run did it. They messed with the Fox logo a bit, and they had a little bit of a car chase happening during it. So I'm sure there's some Foxologists out there who knows exactly when the first Fox parody was of the logo. But anyway, that it's a fun little aside while we start. But if you guys want to ask questions before we get to the actual assembly cut, I'm happy to answer them.
My first question would be, was there anything that you wanted to include in this where the studio was like, no, we would rather you not? Or did you get free reign, or were there notes?
None of it and all of it, what you just said. It's kind of strange because we found this lost cut of the film, right? And Fox was happy to do pretty much whatever. And if Fincher had involved himself, they would have done even more. They would have done whatever he wanted. So it was kind of like an open playing field, but there were restrictions in that. And I think there were restrictions I really placed on it, which was I didn't want to create a glorified fan edit. I didn't want to just throw everything in that we could find, because there was more. There were more scenes that I know some people know about because there's a bootleg VHS out there of an early cut of the film. But that was not in the cut that we found. That extra stuff was not in the cut that we know was generated by Fincher and Terry Rawlings at some stage. So it had an authenticity that we wanted to keep. So therefore, we didn't add in any extra bits except for what was in that cut, which was originally called the Special Edition cut, then the assembly cut for some bizarre reason. By the way, we just passed a shot of the X-ray of Ripley with we don't know at this point, but Ripley with the face hugger. That's actually Meryl Streep's face. If you're interested, if you didn't know that, taken I think from Death Becomes Her, because Alec and Tom, the creature guys, worked on that, I believe. So anyway, I always think it's funny that that's actually Meryl Streep's face with the face hugger on it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But, and by the way, Terry Rawlings, the editor of this, was a big help too. He was not hands-on, but he was very much a kind of a spiritual guide throughout this whole process, and kind of, encouraged us on and gave us advice and tidbits of information regarding the different cuts. But yeah, basically, short story, we found this cut, and the point of it all, I thought, was to conform to that cut versus just making a cut up out of whole cloth on our own, which we could have done, and Fox probably would have been okay with it. But I think people would have had questions like, well, what's the provenance of this cut? Where does it come from? And this way we can say, we found a cut. It came from the guys who actually were making the film, and you've never seen this cut before. Here you go. Did that answer your question more or less?
totally. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Is there ever any talk of putting in I believe there was a planned shot of the EEV hitting something or being damaged to explain why it crashes the way that it does?
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that before. Actually, where'd you get that from? Because might be true. Might be true.
Also, the glass on Ripley's cryotube is cracked open. That's the big clue. Right. I don't know. It might be straight out of the novelization. Might have had that, which doesn't make it part of an earlier script at all.
But it's funny because novelizations and children's storybooks tend to plant false memories in people's, in people's heads where they could have swore they saw Luke and Biggs on Tatooine on the CBS broadcast of Star Wars, and they didn't. It's like things like that. So it's possible that might have been a novelization that just kind of leaked into people's memories of the film. And so now we're about to get into the first special edition / assembly cut footage. And, it was interesting because when we found that cut, a lot of shots, including this one right here with the chains and the kind of like the industrial structures in the background, they weren't there originally. It was just plates of what was shot in England. And we had to basically put together a list of visual effect shots that needed to be finished so that the assembly cut would make sense. The story of it would make sense. And that's where Richard Edlund helped out a bit. And this goes to a thought I had about something that was said in your previous commentary, was that there were no notes from Fincher. There were no Fincher notes discovered that helped us at all. It was notes from Richard Edlund and storyboards from Richard Edlund that guided us through these new visual effects shots that had to be completed. So that was our biggest help in terms of not having someone to tell us exactly what to do. It was easy to restore picture and sound more or less to the cut that we found, but visual effects were completely there was no reference really. There was maybe 2 shots that were finished. But Richard Edlund's notebook was a huge help. That completely got us through shots like this, for instance, which some of the matte painters from Alien 3 came back and did work on these shots. And this, by the way, this scene reminds me in particular of the audio work that had to be done, because when they shot this scene, you have all these smoke blasts and steam and things that are creating all kinds of bad sound, which you hear in the DVD version in the Quadrilogy set. That's why they needed subtitles for the dialogue. For the Anthology Blu-ray set, Fox was very generous to have us bring back Charles Dance, Sigourney Weaver, and Lance Henriksen to redo all their dialogue for these new scenes. So everything here with Charles Dance, I had to work with him by remote. I can't remember what city I was in at the time, but he was in London. And I had to basically, quote unquote, direct him through, I think it was 4 takes we did of his lines of dialogue. And it's incredibly intimidating to direct. And I put those in quotes, an actor like Charles Dance, who is, a formidable and intimidating presence as an actor, but that's why he's so great, And I remember we went into take 3 or 4 and I asked him, can we try one that's maybe, Clement seems like he's kind of smoldering, he's a little more angry. And I couldn't see him, but I could hear the eye roll. It's I could almost hear the eye roll from another continent away. But it was so great to have them back and just redo those lines to give the assembly cut, the Blu-ray version, that extra bit of polish that it didn't have in the Quadrilogy set. We recorded Charles in London, Lance in LA at Fox. And then interestingly, we recorded Sigourney when she was in New York and I was in Detroit directing my first film, Crave. And we spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes doing her lines. And we were on the phone for an hour, just chit chatting about all kinds of things. And that was one of the most delightful phone calls I ever had with an actor, especially that didn't even have to be on the phone with me that long. So she's always been wonderful every time we've had to work with her on these Alien box sets. And that was no exception.
I love that screen gets the age of Newt correct, whereas the theatrical cut has her 4 years older.
Is that right?
Were those shots enhanced? These shots here, did you have to do anything, or was that existing footage?
This is all existing footage. This is exactly the way it was in the early cut. Yeah, I mean, I'll point out visual effect shots as I see them. We've already passed a couple of them, but like this is an effect shot. This was shot in England, but top left frame, you'll see the waves come in. That was added digitally later for us for the assembly cut. And the DVD cut, the special edition. I'm just going to call it assembly cut from now on because that's what people know. But the fact there's like these two cuts floating out there, and actually there's even a third one out there which we can talk about later. But yeah, so that was one of the few little tweaks we did just to kind of bridge or marry the location footage and then the world of Fury 161 because there are no waves there, and it ties it into finding Ripley on the beach, obviously.
The seamlessness of those VFX shots and the ADR that you did with the actors after, it's like I would never have, unless you were saying this, known that this wasn't all just the original missing footage the way it was,
Well, thank you. But that's, again, that goes to the whole team just doing an amazing job, and especially getting a chance to come back and polish it for the Blu-ray set. Like that was huge, being able to do that. And again, something Fox didn't have to do, but they did. And I will forever be in their debt for that, because that was just a really great way to just finish the work that we really wanted to start and didn't get a chance to in terms of finishing. I think in your last commentary, you guys talked about how Fincher loves low angle shots. And I think this scene, more than anyone in the film, it's just like, it's a it's a festival of low angle. It's just incredible. Like all these, and they're all great because they add scope to the world,
Were there any other actors that you had to bring back for lines, for additional lines as well, or just the ones that you mentioned?
Just the ones I mentioned. And the only one I got to do in person was the session with Lance Henriksen. And he was great too. He was wonderful to work with. It's funny, every time we went out to people, whether it was for the ADR or for the interviews for Wreckage and Rage, there was this kind of like confusion from people, like, you're going to do what with Alien 3? Like, why are you coming back to Alien 3 to do anything with it? And it was just like, it was so funny. Like I had to explain that the film has actually developed kind of a following, and it's been reassessed a couple different times, I feel like, over the years, mostly because of Fincher's career becoming, as sort of legendary as it's become, but also because I think people just have allowed the film to kind of settle, and they kind of have seen other things that are as challenging as Alien 3, because at the time when this came out, it was really a tough film to watch. I mean, I remember seeing it opening day at the Avco Theater in Westwood, and my first thought when it was over was, God, it's too bad this guy is never going to direct again, because I thought his career was over after this. But I say too bad because I thought it was amazing. Like, I was so blown away by just the extraordinary talent on display. So, so fortunately, I was very wrong about that. And yeah, it's just to me, it's just a film that's just endlessly fascinating, because I watched it again a few days ago, and I hadn't seen it in a few years. And the detail and just the choices that go against big popcorn studio filmmaking almost at every turn is just exactly what makes this a great Alien film to me. That the films we've seen, well, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, films that are like this, other science fiction films, other kind of sci-fi monster movies, tend to be more in the Aliens vibe, where they're trying to be really audience pleasers. And Alien pleased audiences, but it was also pretty bold and dark and really, really, traumatizing. Aliens less so, but it was still a roller coaster. It was a blast, and it was so much fun with some scares along the way. So to go back to the original tone of the first film was welcome for me, because I really loved the first film. And as much as I love Aliens, it was great to see it go dark and disturbing and really kind of more challenging. in a way that's it's not always successful. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it's still, it had good intentions, and it was just kind of screwed in the process. But hopefully it's kind of limped back to some respectability.
As you were re-engaging with people like Charles Dance, for example, and you were mentioning that Alien 3's reception has somewhat changed over the years, or that it's gotten a following, how do they react to that? Like, how does this sit with some of the people who made it the first time around? Well,
the people who appear in Wreckage and Rage obviously have some sort of fondness for it, or at least their experience with Fincher, or at least they recognize that there are fans out there that would appreciate their participation. The people that did not take part generally are the ones that were either too busy, or they didn't get why there was any reason to come back and talk about this, or why there was any reason to do any more work on a new cut of the film. So, everyone has a different reason for why they take part or not take part. And, and there's other weird considerations as well, which are like schedule and budget for us on the Blu-ray and DVD side of things. We could have interviewed more people, but we ran out of money at some point. We can't keep flying around the world, tracking everybody down wherever they are to interview them. So you may ask, well, why did you get this kind of random low-level person, but you didn't get this huge, big name? Because of that. The low-level person was available, and they were in the same city as we were. The big name was somewhere else, in some exotic locale, making a new movie. So, there's nothing to be gleaned from going down the list to see who took part and who didn't, other than to say, at that moment in time, that's who we got based on their interest or availability. That's really it, really, By the way, I got to tell you, it's surreal doing a commentary, considering I've produced and recorded so many commentaries, and I know my method, which is I let the person talk until they run out of gas. I let them go for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then I give them a question, or I wait until the very end and I ask them all these questions wild, like out of sync with the film, and then edit that in later. So it's really bizarre to be on the other end of that right now with you guys. And now I know why people hate commentaries.
Well, lucky for you, we're going to composite some VFX in this later. We're going to shoot some more footage. You'll be fine.
I love it.
There's going to be an assembly cut of the assembly cut commentary by Charles Lauzirika.
Now, were you surprised at all that, given the history of Alien 3 and certainly how, at least historically among fandom, Fox thought about the film, it wasn't successful? Were you surprised that they wanted to go and essentially restore the film and make it better for Blu-ray?
Yeah, I was surprised, but very thankful. I wasn't like shocked, because I think Fox has had a pretty good track record in terms of picture and sound presentation on their films. And I think there's definitely a pride in their catalog, especially kind of like the crown jewel franchises, of which Alien, I would say, is one of them. So, I was very, very, like, again, surprised, but not shocked. I was just very happy surprised that they wanted to do it. It was like a gift, really. And the fact that it was done so, Patrick, as you said, so seamlessly, it was just really, I was really happy that we were allowed to go back in and do that, and that Fox put the resources towards that. And I think people that got the Blu-ray appreciated it, because it gave, home video collectors and Alien fans something new to get excited about. Beyond just yet another package of something. And that's why with the anthology set, we tried to load it up with so many new and old things, things that were not previously on the old sets, but fans knew about, and then all new stuff that fans didn't know about. I think the anthology set is just, it's a million times better than the quadrilogy set. And people don't really take that on board sometimes, because there's so much stuff on the quadrilogy set, they think, oh, the quadrilogy is plenty. And then you look at the anthology set, it's like, no, there's tons more, there's tons more. We never found the version of the scene that people have talked about that was so painful to watch, where I guess the autopsy was shown in a lot more detail. We never found that footage. Not that we would have included it, but I just wanted to see if it was as bad as people said it was. Because people often talk about, like, during the chest burst, we've seen an Alien where people were passing out or throwing up in the aisles or running out of the theater. And it's like, well, it was scary because I saw it opening night in 1979. And I was a little kid. I was like 11 when I saw it. And it scared the hell out of me, but I didn't pass out or faint or vomit or anything like that. I was kind of like enjoying it. So I'm always interested in these stories that get kind of hyped up over the years.
My
Charles,
wife's
do you have
father.
any insight?
Oh, go ahead, Christian.
Well, I just was curious if you had any insight on why there are flowers on 4 of the coolers. One of them has dog tags as well, so we can assume that's Hicks's.
Right.
But that still leaves 2 people after.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So let's see. It's Newt, it's Hicks, and then it could be, I guess maybe it's like 2 other prisoners that died recently, coincidentally. I mean, there's no one else to go to, right?
Yeah. Just interesting.
Yeah. Maybe, I was going to say they put half a bishop in one, but no, he's on the junk pile. He's on the rubbish tip.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do love it as a detail, though. I think it's a really great little way to know which locker to open up, first of all. But it's just nice that there's somebody there that cares, whether it's one of the religious fanatics or it's Clemens or 85.
Although it begs the question of where they're getting the flowers, unless they're plastic flowers.
Right.
Well,
there's a lot of interesting decor in this film, and that seemed to be left over from the Vincent Ward Wooden Planet version that kind of like seems to tie in with, I don't know, it's kind of a more poetic film in many ways visually, and I think that maybe there's some of that in there as well. Like the flowers, to me, that's something you have not really seen in any of the previous Alien films, or since. So it's just this whole film is a bit of a fever dream. It's a bit of a, it's just more medieval in so many ways, going back to the Wooden Planet part of it. It's just, I love that it has these strange little details that make you ask questions, whereas a lot of films after that are just generic sci-fi locations and sets and spaceships.
yeah, this feels like the best marriage of Vincent Ward and Tui's script. So the prisoners plus the religious order.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first saw the infirmary with those low angles, you get to see the amazing buttresses or whatever that hold up the ceiling. And I can imagine how that would have looked in Vincent Ward's version.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting to consider, with Norman Reynolds' production design, it's like, how far did they get into the Wooden Planet version of all this stuff before Fincher came on board, and then before they started angling it more towards Prison Colony? Did things start to go away from Wooden Planet? Because can we look at this, this set, for instance, and assume this was a Wooden Planet set, and therefore it would have been married to the notion of there being a wooden superstructure over this whole world, and I don't know. It's like there's so much iron and metal, and it doesn't seem to go with the wooden part of it, and there's very little that seems to, other than the design sensibility. I think the kind of like Bosch, kind of like nightmarish, again, medieval kind of style is throughout, but it doesn't have Wooden Planet stink quite on it, I mean, in a way that you would imagine. So yeah, that's the interesting thing about this film. It's such a strange hybrid of so many different ideas, rather than it being Dan O'Bannon and Ron Shusett or James Cameron. It's like there's like, where there's like very, very strong voices telling the story. This seems very committee driven, but with some interesting people mixed in that give it some of that flavor that I think makes the film interesting. But yeah, it's. If someone were to tell me, yeah, this film sucks, it's a mess, I don't argue with them. It's like, I don't think it sucks, and I don't think it's a mess. I think it's a beautiful mess, but I don't think it's like a bad mess. But I get it. It's like, I get why you would disparage the film. I just tend to look for the gems in the wreckage. That's what interests me with this film. That's why I love Blade Runner so much, because Blade Runner originally was kind of mishandled, kind of botched in a way. Not as bad as this, nowhere near as close as bad as this, but it took a while to get that fixed. to a point where I think it's now, I don't say perfect, but close to perfect. This will never be perfect, but it's definitely more interesting. And I think that's why I like this version so much.
We recently interviewed an author named Sarah Welsh Larson, and she pointed out that this room looks like a crypt in a cathedral, the way that bodies are stored with the marble. And so I think that if you apply that any sort of a religious architecture, any place you see that in the film could potentially have been a holdover. So the wrought iron would fit for that, or definitely Andrew's office feels like that was the abbot's office. And then they just retrofit it in a very Blade Runner way of putting technology in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a really great observation. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just like you look at the storyboards from Vincent Ward's version and the conceptual art, the early conceptual art, where it really was pure wood, right? And it's like, I see almost no obvious wood here. I mean, there's obviously wood being used in places, but when you see this this amazing tile and all the metal, and the rubber and everything that's basically not wood, it's everywhere. Where is wood obviously in that shot? It's hard to see, right? So that's why, and yet the design sensibility seems like it's kind of a strange hybrid of Wooden Planet and Prison Planet. This kind of Art Deco vibe. It's like, what world is that from? It doesn't seem like it's from either world, It's definitely not Wooden Planet monks, and it seems weird to be Prison Planet. But it still works because it makes the place seem so ancient and old and forgotten and lost and left to the rubbish tip of time. Again, fascinating. And I think that maybe Fincher and Norman Reynolds probably worked in some of their own fetishes and loves of other films and other design sensibilities into this, since I imagine at some point they thought, what the hell, might as well, this thing's off the rails anyway, let's just make it look cool, and I feel like that's why this film is visually so stunning. At every turn it looks cool.
That's one of my big disappointments with Alien Resurrection, is when you bring in someone like Jean-Pierre Jeunet, but he doesn't go as French as I wanted him to. I wanted that City of Lost Children look, and I think that he was nervous about that being a Hollywood film. And so that film has a bigger budget, I assume, but it's so generic looking in the sets. And all the details on the walls, it's unnecessary and it's great.
I'll get into that in a second, but I'll point something out right here. The super face hugger that's being seen in this wide shot, I've had people ask me, why didn't you go to a close-up of it? Because there's a close-up of it. We use it, I believe, somewhere in Wreckage and Rage. And again, I go to, it wasn't in the assembly cut we found. That is the shot we found. So again, we didn't want to fan edit any of this. Going back to really quickly to the Alien Resurrection thing, it's I read the script for Alien Resurrection about a year before the movie came out. And I thought, well, if that's how you bring Ripley back, if that's how you have to bring her back, and if that's how you make the Aliens fans happy after pissing them off with Alien 3, okay, whatever, fine. But when they announced Jean-Pierre Jeunet, I thought, oh, that's exciting, because you've got a very kind of Americanized script, but you're going to bring in a very heavily European director. That might balance it out and make a really cool Alien film. And it didn't quite, in my opinion. Amazing talent behind the camera and in front of the camera on Alien Resurrection, but it just didn't coalesce, I think, as I'm sure as people hoped it would. It's probably a tonal thing. I think it was a little too comedic in many ways, but I can't remember. What did you guys think of the ox versus dog situation here?
I like the way it explodes from the dog better, but I like the aesthetics of the ox. I just feel like the way it came out of the ox looked kind of fake in a movie that really looks amazing. It just kind of stood out to me, but
I prefer the dog because I think people care about dogs. They don't care about oxes quite as much. Mm-hmm. And so it's a more sympathetic, more painful thing to watch with the dog. And also explains why the alien is faster and why it's, I know they want it to look like a puma. So a dog is closer to that than an ox, that's for sure.
The ox is also dead, which is a very interesting, we've never seen that before, an alien gestating inside a dead host. So
it's almost like a zombie alien. It's like a zombie puma alien.
Yeah.
All mixed into one.
But they make such a big deal about having to shave their heads, and then you have a dog that's covered in hair.
Right.
I mean, the ox has something too, but I don't know. I'm pro ox.
I mean, I love the ox just as something different and unusual. And I mean, it's great to see all this footage. But I think going to the dog was a smart move for an audience, to have an impact on an audience. I think the ox is just too strange and doesn't make a lot of sense, and makes you ask questions at a point in the film where you don't want to be asking questions. You want to be emotionally locked into Ripley's plight and what's happening with her two friends.
Charles,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The lack of a dog does bring up something later that we're going to see with Murphy, where it appears that he still says Spike when he's looking into the hole. Okay. We'll get there when we get there.
That'll be the chapter on seamless branching that we talk about later.
He could say Smeg. That, it's a Britishism.
What was the sense that you got from, if you even had these conversations, when you're talking with Sigourney and with Charles Dance and even Lance Henriksen, in terms of what they thought about the film that many years later? Was it something they were still proud of?
I didn't get to talk to Charles about it, but I spoke with Lance a little bit about it, and Sigourney quite a bit about it. And I think that they felt the film really got a raw deal when it came out. By the way, this is CG Bambi Burster here, created just for this cut of the film, as is this next shot, also CG, which I think is pretty good, to be honest, for a home video release. I think it does the job. It conveys the story and what's happening clearly, and it doesn't take you out of it like, oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever seen, especially with the controversial rod puppet shots yet to come. But no, in terms of the actors and their thoughts about it, I feel like there's a feeling like the film really got shafted in the process, and its reputation is worse than it deserves. And thankfully, time has been kinder to it. There's a certain brand of Alien fan that's always going to hate it. Namely the ones that are pissed that Hicks and Newt got killed off so unceremoniously in the beginning, and where did that damn egg come from, and all that whole crowd is never going to love Alien 3. For the people who can get over it, I think that there's a lot to be taken from this film, a lot of great value artistically. It's not the most entertaining film. It has some great entertaining moments here and there, but I definitely think it's a beautifully designed, beautifully shot, absolutely beautifully performed film. Some really great performances in this. In fact, I think it's Sigourney's best performance as Ripley out of all the films that she's done with the character. So there's a lot of weight to it that I really enjoy. That's not in the other films in the same way. The first two films are really purely about survival, I feel like, on kind of a low budget version and a big budget version. But this to me is about survival, but so much more. It's about spiritual survival. It's about Ripley as just, an iconic hero for us. It's about her survival, but it's also about her not surviving. It's about her departure. And I think that if you look at Alien as a film about birth and Aliens as a film about life, this one had to be about death. And it had to treat the opening with Hicks and Newt brutally, because you needed to tell the audience that no one was safe. And this one, we find out no one is safe. The hero of all heroes is not safe in this film. And that's another reason why I think it's so bold. And I think it's worth, celebrating.
The thing they never tell you about doing commentary tracks is that you have to also not just watch the movie the entire time, because I'm just sitting here like sucked into the movie right now. It's so good. I just want to point out briefly something that I hadn't even registered before in that previous shot in the showers. There's like paddles on the wall, and I don't know why I never even registered how bizarre of a detail that was, and what that tells you about the world building.
Yeah, I noticed that the other day when I was watching your guys' commentary, and I was wondering, is that a disciplinary thing? Is it what is that?
Yeah, what's up with that? One quick question for you, actually, Charles, is Paul McGann's role in this is like significantly larger, right? Mm-hmm. Did you get to talk to him about that at all? Do you have an idea like how he feels about Golic's, not redemption, but his resurfacing in this movie?
Well, to be honest, that was one interview I didn't get to conduct on Wreckage and Rage. So all I could go off was the interview itself. But I know he's happy that he's back in, because when the film came out, his friends went to go see it, and they're like, "Dude, you're barely in the film." You know, they were like, they were, what happened to you? And I know that he had some concerns that with his performance, like he had, he was trying out different accents, and he was like trying to find different ways to get into Golic and make him interesting. And I think he might have been concerned at some point that the studio was not liking what he was doing. So he might have blamed himself for him being cut out of the film, which is not true. He's fantastic. He's one of the best parts of it. So, but I definitely got the sense from his interview that he was very happy with what we were doing, and that he got to, he is the VIP of this new cut. I mean, he really is. His work in it really takes it to a whole other level. And that's probably one of the reasons why he's one of the only actors, I think, that we got for Wreckage and Rage in terms of a new interview. He's the only actor, I think, because Lance, I did while I was doing the Aliens interviews. I interviewed him for that. So we piggybacked Alien 3 into that. And actually the same with Michael Biehn and Carrie Henn, to ask them what they thought about Alien 3. And, get Michael Bihn's wonderful, bitter stories about not being back as Hicks. So, but yeah, I really think that Golic is just such an interesting character, and the performance is so bizarre, but like in just the right way. I mean, the scene when he goes to the toxic waste dump and pulls out the knife and, says, sorry. It's like, it's so creepy the way he does that. And I can't imagine another actor doing that, like making that same choice. I could see it being a really easily, kind of quiet, silent, badass slash, and does his thing. And the fact that he conveys this pathetic, just remorse over what he has to do to release the dragon. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a wonderful moment.
There's such a Renfield quality to that character.
Absolutely, for sure.
And that was such a new idea too for the franchise, to have someone see the alien in that light and do what he did.
I mean, again, for as messy as the movie is, it has tons of new ideas. It's trying all kinds of different things just to get away from what's been done before. Because, you could argue that Aliens borrows a lot from the first film structurally and in terms of just the basic beats of it. Where Aliens has fun is in the new characters and the new situations, and kind of like the badasses being humiliated by a primitive force, which is like a straight out of the Vietnam analogy. So that makes total sense. But Alien 3 did not have that luxury, because it's the third film. People are really gonna be tired of the same old. So it's like, okay, we've got to be very weird and strange with this movie. And I think that they did a really good job with that, but with a purpose that just got muddled again with all the production interference and all the hell that everyone went through on this film. But sometimes hell on a production results in a more interesting film, as we saw with Blade Runner, right? But Apocalypse Now, The Abyss. There's so many films that have had terrible, terrible production experiences for a cast and crew, and yet they turned out to be really interesting films that they might not have if it had been a smooth sailing, no problem production. And I love that we get to see this side of Ripley that we'd never seen before either. People get horny, and Ripley's a person, so why not? But I think that of all the people that she would have hooked up with, obviously Clemens is the right guy, and I love their chemistry together as actors. It's really feels real. For being such I don't want to call it forced, but for being almost like a rushed relationship, it works because of those two actors. They're so good.
Now, does audio still exist of him singing "Paint It Black" by the Rolling Stones?
I did not find that. I didn't see that anywhere. If it was there, it might. There's like literally hundreds upon hundreds of boxes of materials at the studio. And when you find what you're looking for, you tend to focus all your energies on that. and the little kind of like side quests don't always take priority. We, if we catch it along the way, great. But I didn't come across that when we were looking through everything. Did you had a question about the dog, about Spike?
Oh, what he says in this cut, since Spike isn't here.
Right. So that's the thing. That's basically an artifact of seamless branching programming. Because I believe in the Quadrilogy DVD set, it's correct. I might be wrong on that, but I could have sworn it was done correctly. And this time, for whatever reason, it was like, the very specific time codes you have to program to allow for different versions to play in a certain build of, clips. It for whatever reason got missed, or it was the wrong time code or whatever, but it happens because that's a whole process that happens after we do our thing. But it would have been nice to know if it had been caught, we would have, tried to deal with it. But you could just assume maybe it's another prisoner, it's another dog somewhere in there. I don't know. He's talking to himself. He's thinking about someone back home.
His character makes me think so much of Marion Crane from Psycho, to have this protagonist introduced early on that you think you're going to follow the whole way through. And even his death scene has that echo of the shower stabbing.
Absolutely. No, that's a really great observation. And those types of things I think are really powerful when you in a similar way in Alien, when, he didn't die super early, but, you think Dallas being the captain of the ship would last, especially by 1979 standards, like Tom Skerritt's probably the biggest name on the cast at that point. And, you would assume he would go all the way to the end and be the hero and be victorious. And nope, he wasn't. And that's what was so great about the reveal of Ripley as the new hero, is that she came out of the shadows. She was like almost the most forgettable character until she wasn't, until she was leading it. And that was so impressive to see. So, I don't remember did Aliens have an early death of somebody that we thought would go all the way? I mean, I can't think of one.
Well, all three films have someone in a leadership position die early so that Ripley can take over.
Yeah.
So
Apone being the one of the, I say, okay. Yeah.
Not Gorman.
No, not Gorman.
Although he's taken out of commission for a bit.
Totally. But the thing is, I don't think anyone in the audience would think Apone's going to go all the way. He's going to be the final, victor of all this.
Or Gorman, for that matter.
Oh, exactly. It's funny because I working on the box set, I got to see the footage of James Remar as Hicks, and James Remar is a really good actor, but I'm so glad Michael Biehn got the part, because Michael Biehn brought a sympathy to Hicks that was not there with Remar, being like cigar chopping World War II, Sarge type guy. And, I thought Michael Biehn was just so much like softer, but like in a way that made him stronger because you cared about him more and you really wanted him to get through this. And you kind of saw him as a potential partner for Ripley in a way, not just, I don't mean romantically. I mean, just as a partner in battle, like a comrade. But again, I'm sure Michael Biehn would love to have explored that in an Alien 3 that he would have been in.
I guess that's as good a point as any to bring up a question that I have from a listener who knows that we're doing this at the moment, which is about the the previous script versions. Obviously, in putting this together, that wasn't something you had to concern yourself with. But were you ever like in touch with, for example, like Gibson or Gibson's people or Tui's people or Ward's people? Were they ever like in the orbit of this new box set coming together? I mean, I know a lot of them, like Ward is in your documentary, for example, right?
Yeah, we got Vincent Ward, we got Rennie Harlan. In terms of the writers, we reached out to William Gibson first, and he declined. And then around that time, we got word from Fox Legal that we had to be very careful in discussing other writers for, Writers Guild rules or whatever. And we do discuss them briefly in the documentary, but in terms of giving them commentary or interview space in there, it was going to be a little tricky. And again, we're always worried about budget and how many people can we interview, because each time we shoot someone, it costs, X thousands of dollars to do that. So, when we got the word that we would have to almost pre-censor ourselves, it's kind of like, well, let's focus on the people that we can talk to, and then we'll see where we're at the end.
Right.
I was going to do a pretty detailed interactive guide between all the different script drafts of Alien 3, like a writer's guide. And I've requested all the scripts, and I was getting ready to break all that down. And then that's when I got the word, like, yeah, we probably steer clear of that stuff, because you might do all this work and then it might get thrown out at the end because we couldn't legally clear it. So you move on. It's sad, but we tried. We always try. That's the thing. It's like on all these projects that myself, my editors, my producers do, we always try. And if we don't get to do it, well, we think about it for the next time. So there's almost always a next time on these bigger ones.
How long was it for you and your team from beginning to end in terms of finishing this restoration?
It's difficult to say because we were doing simultaneous restorations on 1, 3, and 4. And a lot of times some of the work crossed over, some of the people crossed over. But the first go, the Quadrilogy set where we did most of the work, I think it was about 14 months all told. And then when we came back for the anthology, it was about another year, but not for the same reasons and not all on, like the sound work on Alien 3. So, let's just say about a year, all told. But, we did, a longer cut of Alien, like a complete cut with every deleted scene put back in, and Ridley watched it and thought it was too long and boring and uninteresting. And I said, well, yeah, that's why your cut, the 1979 cut, is the perfect cut of the film. The theatrical cut is your cut. This is meant to show fans what it would have been like had you put everything in. And he didn't buy that argument. So we got the director's cut, quote unquote, that's on the set, which is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of like in between. And then Aliens, of course, had already been done previously for Laserdisc, so there's no need to touch that. And then we did 3, as we're discussing now. And then Resurrection, Jean-Pierre Jeunet allowed it. He didn't take part really, but, he said, just so long as you don't call it a director's cut, it's fine. Just kind of take the footage you've got, put it in, fix the effects. Really, he didn't really have much to say about it. In fact, we had to explain it to him a couple times what we were doing. So he felt so long as it was clearly not his version that we could kind of just do it with whatever we did. So, and again, we did the best we could with the footage that we had found. This set's amazing, by the way. This might be one of my favorite sets in the whole movie. I love that it has that kind of cheesy 80s glass brick, but mixed with so many like really, really old, ancient looking influences, and yet some kind of it almost looks like Mark Romanik's 9 Inch Nails video for Closer. It kind of reminds me of that.
They're drinking out of French presses.
I don't know which came first. Was it Closer or this? Probably this, I'm thinking, right?
Yeah, Closer was the next year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if Mark saw this and thought, oh, I'm going to borrow a little. He would probably kill me if he heard me say that. So I'm going to retract that line. But I should mention Mark because Mark tried to get me connected with Fincher to get him involved on this cut. I was producing the special edition materials for 1 Hour Photo. And I asked him, I said, I know you guys know each other. And I know you share office space or whatever. Could you ask Fincher if he would participate? And he said, well, I'll see, I'll try. And then just randomly, when I was out at lunch one day, there was a voicemail left and it was Fincher. Saying, Mark Romanik told me to call you about Alien 3 and then click. So and I tried calling him back and never got a hold of him. So Mark tried, he did his job, but unfortunately I missed my shot because I was at the lunch for, the lunch hour.
Was there an actual click? I need to know. Did he actually hang up the phone?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't like a mean click. It was just. It was abrupt. It was just an abrupt end of the message. That's all.
Fair enough.
It's like you could tell, like the 12 words he uttered in this voicemail was about all he ever had to say about Alien 3. So I feel like that was. I wish I still had the recording. By the way, I would have hid it as an Easter egg on the disc somewhere. But
I love that they're drinking out of French presses.
Yes,
that's a little detail. But also that Andrews has one accent for when he makes his big rumor control presentations, and then in close quarters, his real accent comes out.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's a production inconsistency or a deliberate choice?
No, absolutely, that's his choice.
Yeah,
but, he puts on airs when he's talking to the prisoners. I love this set so much.
Yeah, Christian, I believe you said this is the comfiest set in all of Alien, correct?
In all of the films, this is the one I would live in. With it, not
the Dippy
with
Bird
Andrews there, and the Dippy Bird's there. Yep.
Nice shot of the Dippy Bird right there.
I might agree with you on that. I'm thinking back to all the various sets.
Yeah,
and it's definitely the most kind of like cozy.
I mean, maybe the Narcissus when you're listening to the classical music in the first film.
But it doesn't have like any of the comforts of home that Andrew's office tends to have. It's like it just feels like more like a proper office. And Narcissus is just kind of
in the office in a later shot, you can see a photo of Andrew's family, and it looks like maybe it's the actor's family because they're very late 80s, early 90s, and the daughter is wearing some sort of a superhero costume. It's very strange. I'll point it out when it comes up later.
And I think you guys were asking about the kanji or the kind of the Asian influences.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. Yeah.
I mean, look, Weyland-Yutani. Maybe it's the Yutani side of it. You know.
Good point. Oh, you want to talk about Nine Inch Nails videos? This entire Wreckage and Rage for me screams Nine Inch Nails. I mean, musically too, but also visually. You can really see like this is where like early 90s music video industrial rock like gets its aesthetic from, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's an attempted rape in all three of the first films. There's the symbolic rape by Ash with the magazine. There's the face hugger in the second film. And then here's the most explicit version.
Wait, let's back up to that. Oh, you mean so the face hugger when it gets loose in the med bay and it goes after?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
What about Resurrection?
I don't talk about that film.
The entire film, I think, counts as one.
I have one of these jackets, by the way, one of these like tanker jackets or whatever, with the patches on them. When COVID first hit, and none of us were getting haircuts, my sweet mother-in-law came over to buzz my hair, and so I had my hair buzzed for the one time in my life. But I took a picture of me in my Alien 3 jacket on, just to memorialize that haircut.
It's awesome.
I like how they just discovered cigarettes after all these years of being there. They're just like the cigarette dispenser that they just discovered.
So is the concept that this place is just so sprawling from the original intent that there's undiscovered areas where things were left when most people were pulled out?
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume that, but there's already candles up that they put up and lit. So I'm guessing that they are engaged in an ongoing mapping of the complex because, as you say, it's so big, and they're probably foraging for whatever supplies that they could use. But we know they get supplies from Weyland-Yutani on a fairly regular basis. So that's why I think it's weird about the cigarette machine as being like this big discovery that has to kick in the glass on.
Although it happens. Well,
go ahead.
Just briefly, it happens contemporaneously with the first like allowance of swear words happening right there. So it almost seems like in this crisis of faith moment, they're like relaxing a little bit. So maybe they knew the cigarettes were there and now they're like okay with breaking it because of what's going on. They're starting to say shit more often because, you know, maybe I'm giving the film too much credit, but you never know.
I think you're doing a lot of heavy lifting for what we're seeing.
When Rains dies here in a minute, I swear Woodruff must be holding the alien head upside down in the shot. I don't think it's a person in a costume, but it's not a composite shot either. You just see the head coming up from below. You'll see it in a second. It's very bizarre, but neat because it's doing something that a human couldn't do. I jumped the gun on this. He hasn't gotten there yet.
That's interesting because in Wreckage and Rage, there's a moment where Fincher and Tom Woodruff, who's in the suit, and Alec Gillis, who's kind of like trying to broker the body movements between the two. Fincher's trying to get the head further and further down, and you know he can't quite see. And like it's kind of funny. Like Fincher had all these different ideas on how like what the head should look like. Is that it? Is that what you're talking about?
When we cut back to his legs dangling, you're right there. That's the head upside down because the head is touching see the curve.
Yeah, it looks like it's on its side on the ground. But you think it's upside down? I mean, I see the jaw.
Yeah. Like physically holding it. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. But that was the thing is like in that scene in the medical bay or whatever that they were, you know, Fincher's more interested in the shadow that was being cast on the wall versus how the alien actually was looking in real life. So they were kind of like debating over placement of the head versus relationship to the body. And I'm guessing that maybe it was something similar with this. It just looked better, even if it didn't make any sense. Which is often, that's often in films where you do things and someone on set says that's not going to work, but they don't know what the director is seeing. So I've encountered that many times being on set where a very, you know, acclaimed director who shouldn't be questioned is questioned. And I'm like, all right, you opened a can of worms because I bet it looks awesome in the movie. And it did. I won't mention what I'm talking about.
Ridley Scott is notorious for that, right? And a lot of his shoots, he'll say like, it doesn't matter, it's going to look good. He's typically right about that. Oh, that shot. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Was there any challenge in terms of color correcting and added footage? Like, was that a whole process as well when you're adding footage back into?
Well, it's an interesting question because, again, it's like if Fincher had chosen to be involved, it would have been a whole different ballgame. It would have been like start from scratch, do whatever he wants. Was he happy with the previous looks of the home video releases or not? He could have done whatever he wanted. So in this case, it was more about just matching what had been previously established in, past releases. So it wasn't, I'm sure there was some challenge to it with the colorists, but I don't think it was artistically that interesting because it was basically matching what was already there. It wasn't like a director coming in and saying, changes slightly this way or that way for 6 weeks. It was just match what we got. So it might have been like legwork in terms of the technical side of it and finding the elements and making sure everything was, seamless. But creatively speaking, I'm sure it's a pretty dry experience for everyone that did that.
Did you have access to the earlier footage of this shot? This was a reshoot, correct?
It was an additional shoot. They went back and shot all that in LA to get the lip sync right with the audio. I don't think we saw any of the previous stuff other than in behind the scenes footage and before the actual close lip sync shots, which again, I think was the reshoot part of it.
Oh, okay.
If I remember correctly. Like this is all LA, I think, but I think the other, this is London, I'm going to say. That's LA. I believe, if it was explained correctly to me. Because if you see Sigourney with her real shaved head, it's London. And if you see the slightly puffier version, that's LA. Because that's the skin cap, the bald cap.
Were all of her reshoots just for the very end, though?
I believe so. I believe it was all for that final battle, climbing up the pipes and all that stuff. So, it's really, I don't want to say it's obvious in a bad way, but if you know what you're looking for, you can spot the LA shots because, it's just slightly bigger. She has a slightly bigger head,
Mars Attacks or something.
Well, more like Alien Nation. Remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Like the slightly puffier head, kind of like that.
Right.
Like, what is he eating? Is it like a box of Wailing Atomic cereal?
just thinking
I want to
what
know.
is in the bowl?
It's cereal of some kind, but I want to see that box now.
I know. I just want to see the brands of the future.
So
that's
Charles,
what I love about Alien was like seeing like the beer cans and all like the little details of the cigarettes and all that.
Yeah, the Aspen beer and everything. A technical question. That previous shot where it's coming down on Paul McGann kind of slowly from overhead. What kind of rig was that shot with? And is that something that you think Fincher uses a lot? I feel like there's a lot of shots of like slowly descending upper to lower views on things. How do you think he shot that?
I have no idea, to be honest. Some kind of a jib arm or something. I don't know. I mean, there's probably like 16 different ways to shoot that shot. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend I know.
I mean, we're not going to be able to correct you, so you can't.
Yeah.
I feel like this set's pretty cozy too in its own way. It's very warmly lit. We've got the curtains. It just feels intimate.
Yeah. No, I mean, if Andrews' office had a bed, it'd be perfect. But here we got beds. So you're right. It might be a good reason to have this as a plan B.
Although there's a hole in the ceiling.
It's true. There's a lot of holes in these ceilings in this film.
In the mess hall, you can actually see broken, not glass, but whatever the ceiling panel is supposed to be. In that previous shot, like they had either broken it or something previously.
Yeah.
So that's a nice touch.
Yeah, no, and it's very deliberate. Obviously, it's like letting you know that it could come from anywhere.
You notice also Charles S. Dutton, speaking of low angle shots, is almost always shot from that angle. There's this really beautiful, consistently, reinforced heroic angle on him a lot of the time. I mean, I guess everybody's getting it in there, but
yeah, no, he tends to get a lot of them, a lot of power shots. By the way, as an Indiana Jones fan, I just love that Norman Reynolds was the production designer on this film. Just he's such a great production designer that to see him in the Alien universe is pretty awesome.
And was he there from the Ward days on?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was consistent throughout, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the art department was there for Ward.
I just have to jump in and say, having just accessed Bishop, where Bishop says it was with us the whole way, the alien, blah, 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 and the fact that the acid burns have been seen, I wish that she would say this to them. She actually has evidence this time. That's just my gripe.
Yeah. Well, you could argue. Go ahead.
Well, in Aliens, they tell her that they went over the escape pod inch by inch and they didn't find anything. But here, she has the evidence in her hand. So
yeah. Sometimes it's just convenient for the writers to ignore these things.
Yep.
Do you guys watch the pitch meeting videos on YouTube that guy does, the studio exec and the writer? He should do Alien 3. Like, that would be a really good one to do.
That would be a great one.
His Batman is brutal, but it's
they're
right
all
on.
brutal. They're all brutal. All of his are brutal.
If we all wrote in, he'd probably do it.
And when you say Batman, you mean the Batman?
Yes, I'm sorry, the new one. Yeah.
We got to distinguish these things. By the way, I love the Batman because it's, to me, the most Fincher-esque of all the Batman movies.
Well, as these guys know,
I finally got the Fincher Batman movie I've always wanted.
I was turned off by that at first because it just looked like Seven. Like, I've seen Seven, but then I went and saw it and I got converted. So,
like I mentioned before, when this came out, when Alien 3 came out, and I said, it's too bad Fincher's never going to work again. I was like on the early bandwagon for like back in the old like AOL movie message boards of like Fincher should direct a Star Wars movie, Fincher should direct an Alien movie, or not an Alien movie, a Batman movie. And I was I can't remember what year it was, but it was really early on. I said Fincher should direct The Dark Knight Returns with Clint Eastwood as Batman and Willem Dafoe as the Joker. And everyone thought I was absolutely batshit insane to suggest Fincher being the director. And I thought, you guys have no idea. You've only seen Alien 3. You've not watched his other videos and commercials. Like he's got the world building and he's got the look.
I would definitely have seen that movie. I was like that.
Another hole in the ceiling.
Another hole in the ceiling, and also more stained glass on the walls too.
Mm-hmm. I sort of soft pitched the idea of doing an animated version of Vincent Ward's Wooden Planet story to someone at Fox some years back. And, I got a nice nod and a smile, and then I never heard about it again. But I would just love to see Ward's Wooden Planet story in some form. And I feel like some weird kind of like almost Eastern European, Polish animation would be like appropriate for his story.
Yeah, something really expressionist,
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Jan Svenkmeyer.
Or like Brothers Quay, or just, something really unusual would be great.
Fincher's Coca-Cola commercial that looks like some sort of crazy Blade Runner mashup. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, the rollerbladers one. Yeah, it's great.
Yep. We're watching the movie again.
Well, it's a big scene we're about to see,
I love that the technology isn't sci-fi for the needles and injections.
Yeah, I mean, did we see anything in Ash's like med bay that was like either this level of technology, considering that this is how many years later? I forgot.
57
years later.
He has the laser scalpel that cuts there's everything's a little more high tech.
Yeah, the pen light, but it's all believable within the world, though.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine that Fury 161's been around for 57 years. Would you imagine that? I don't know. Maybe.
I've always assumed it was around longer than that. To me, this is like 120 years old. I think it reminds me a lot of churches that I grew up singing in, because I was in a boys choir for my childhood. So I'd always go to these, all these cathedrals all over the place. And there would always be like undercrofts, underneath the church. And then in the undercroft, there would be like crypts, which were sometimes actual crypts and sometimes they were just sort of called that. But they're these spaces that have completely different architectural styles, like what you were saying earlier, Charles, that just like it just feels like this mishmash of history that got kind of cordoned off and built around, And so when I see these sets, I really think about that. I think about being a kid wandering those crypts and wondering like what planet they came from,
Well, I love that idea, because I feel like if you try to, fix each of these movies in a very hard canon with each other, you're always going to be disappointed, because each one comes from such a unique, powerful director with their own vision. And I think that you can't really line all these up like you could, Star Wars movie or whatever. It's like they're each one. That's what I love about the Alien movies. It's like a film festival. It's different filmmakers telling different stories, completely different looks and styles that just have a few, running through lines of certain characters and certain references to things. And then of course the Alien itself, which has never looked the same across any of the films, I love that. This is great stuff. Look at that. That is so cool.
Yeah, that is chills inducing.
Yeah. I mean, you guys know, is there anything in sort of like the books, the comics that tie in Alien 3 in any kind of detail to the timeline of anything else? I mean, are they just kind of like they do their own thing? Because I feel like everything I've seen has been very Aliens influenced, very Colonial Marines, you know?
Well, there was a comic series called Aliens Defiance that borrowed those the establishing shots from your cut, where when you see him walking on the planet's surface, almost implying that there had been something. We're talking over a great scene here. I'm sorry. No, mostly the comics are individual, like they, just concerned with their own story.
Because I feel like there have been attempts to tie in the space jockey, occasionally here and there. And I remember on Prometheus, I was going to try to whisper to somebody that, like maybe Arthur Max or somebody, that, hey, it'd be great if you brought the EEV back from Alien 3, since you have escape pods on the Prometheus, but then, timeline doesn't quite work out.
I think there was a connection, just from what I know, I'm obviously no expert on anything, but originally for Alien Resurrection, Call was going to talk about the Morse diaries. About
That's in the novel.
Last prisoner from, is it in the novel? Okay.
Yeah. Space Beast. Well, in the novelization by A.C. Crispin, they just say, I read Morse's book, is what Call says. And then the next author that took a pass on it was S.T. Perry, and she gave it a title, called it Space Beast, and said that it was this underground, publication. And now the Alien role-playing game has run with that a little more to start making there be this kind of an alien worshipping cult that uses Morse's book as their Bible.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. I asked what book these guys were reading. Holt McElhaney, I wrote him on Twitter, and he immediately wrote back and said that they were reading, it was like one of those, like, How to Make Friends and Influence People, or whatever that book is, which I thought was kind of a fun detail.
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie right there.
Yeah. Andrews has a fanny pack on, which is pretty funny.
The other question I have is, was this always a prison facility? Because it looks so nicely designed, and like before we passed that shot was that kind of like deco looking like sculpture, like the with the.
Well, that's the scales of justice, so that feels fitting. But that overall, no. Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of Outland a little bit, actually. This area.
Absolutely.
Visually.
Yeah.
Just masterful editing in that sequence, I think, every time I watch it.
I'm not sure this shot is necessary. I feel like it was better just like being on his level and like what could be up in there, versus being like, oh, if the alien is there, that's its point of view. But that was in the cut. It was in the assembly cut. Same with this.
Remember that guy from Sherwood?
Are you guys in touch with a lot of the actors from this?
We're working on it.
Yeah. I was curious, because you asked me earlier what I had heard from the actors, what they thought of Alien 3 after all these years. I wonder if you'd heard anything.
Well, we had one of my favorite episodes ever, and I'll turn over to Jamie because he just unmuted it. I'm sure he's going to bring it up. But Ralph Brown came on and talked. He spent like an entire afternoon with us, and it was one of the best interviews we've ever had. Jamie, is that what you're going to talk about?
Yeah, it was really great just to hear his take on shooting this film, working with Sigourney, of course, being one of the only actors in the film, one of two to go to the end. But yeah, we're working on a couple of others, but.
This shot that we keep cutting to is like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You have her in the foreground. Absolutely. And all the prisoners are smaller than her in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And that the composition of that shot in particular, I think is like completely iconic to me in a way that like it's another one of these moments where you see how David Fincher knows how to put a movie together. It's just so iconic.
The fact that her eye has now healed has led some people to believe that carrying an alien, or at least carrying a queen, influences your rate of healing. I don't know how better to put it. Because she has a bloodshot eye at the very beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Well,
I buy it. I mean, why not?
How many days have passed at this point? Do we have any indication of that?
I mean, not that I know of. I don't see any kind of way to measure time in this movie, but
yeah, there's no like go to bed, wake up scene.
Well, there is
go to bed, but not much sleeping.
Right? Yeah, they go to bed, but
yeah.
Hold on though. They have sex and then apparently take a nap because she wakes up and he's facing the other way. It's that terrible Hollywood trope.
Yeah.
But that appears to be in the middle of the day, because the scenes that come before and after kind of imply that, they had a little afternoon delight.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. My headcanon says it's like takes place within like a week or two. But
my headcanon says like less than a week. I just feel like the alien timeline of it all would not allow for much longer than that.
That's a good point.
I love that shot. Like back to 1992, that was one of my favorite shots in this movie. It seems like weird to throw away dialogue on a silhouette shot like that, but it's so beautiful because it shows the map. It like tells you so much about what they're talking about.
They recreate that shot in the comics too. The comics that came out around the same time as the movie. A lot of shots in the comic book are shot for shot of the movie, which I thought was interesting.
Jamie, did you know that the Dark Horse actually had to send the artist to the theater to watch the film to know how the theatrical cut ended?
Really?
Yeah. The last issue hadn't come out when the movie was released, and they just weren't getting anything from Fox. So they went and watched the movie and then drew from memory.
Wow.
This is one bit I wish stayed in the theatrical cut, was the capturing the alien, because it's again something we hadn't seen before and kind of gives you hope that you might be able to beat the thing. Although would the alien have like drooled acid on a wall or something and climbed out? I mean, we've kind of seen a version of that in Resurrection, right?
That's true.
So our listeners may not know this, but this is a verite project that we're doing in real time as we're going. So because of that, there have been a couple connection drops momentarily. We're not going to do anything to them because it'll screw up the runtime of the track. So just be patient with us. But another thing is that many of us, our kids are going to bed during this time, so we've had to kind of sneak off and say goodnight to them and come back. And while I was gone, Jamie tells me that you had a conversation about the expanded universe and ties to Alien 3. And I'm wondering, Charlie, did you get a chance to see the Gibson Dark Horse comics that came out 2 years ago with Johnny Christmas? And
I did not. I read Gibson's script a million years ago, but I did not look at the adaptation. Not because I didn't want to. I just never came my way. So how was it? Did you like the way it turned out?
Yeah, I think he did an admirable job with it. I think it didn't fix some of the fundamental problems that I personally have with the Gibson scripts, both of them. But I think that the art style is really interesting, and it gets at a lot of the body horror that's implicit in there and the UPP and all that stuff. But what's interesting is earlier when I was asking about Gibson's participation, for example, when you were putting together the materials, and you were saying he was kind of reticent to do it. Johnny Christmas actually was able to like sit down in a coffee shop with Gibson. And this is, of course, much more recent than your interactions with him were. And Gibson had kind of, I don't know if he necessarily turned a corner, but he was really excited to talk about his script with him, and he gave him a lot of like personal notes about it. And so yeah, it's interesting. This is a movie that evolves so much over time for different people, I think. And I kind of hope that Gibson's one of them. Yeah,
I mean, for sure. I was kind of bummed that we didn't get him. because I also wanted to talk about Blade Runner as well. But just the cyberpunk of it all. But I think that would have been really interesting to kind of track in more detail the journey across like the development hell that Alien 3 went through, and all the different scripts and ideas and input that was given to all the writers and directors. And of course, he being who he is, I think that would have been a really amazing voice to have documented.
There was a short story sequel.
I was going to say really quick, that's the thing about the Alien franchise. Like, there's never been one caretaker of it all. So that's why it's so unwieldy. Unlike maybe like a franchise up until the Disney era that George Lucas could control with Star Wars. It's like, I consider like the first 6 Star Wars films, let me put it this way. All of them are canon, but I only consider the first 6 gospel, because they came from George. They came from the maker, right? So I think that I wonder what Alien would have been like had there been someone like that throughout the entirety of it, that could sort of, just be the caretaker of it all and keep it within a certain, certain rails that will keep it consistent as a world. But then let certain filmmakers play within those parameters. Instead, we got like no rails at all. And that's why it's gone off the rails so many times, because whatever, just do whatever you want. And there's something fun about that, about the chaos of it, but it might also be why the franchise is not locked in on a bigger level. Like maybe Marvel, say, like Marvel is super tight with their continuity, but just a random minor observation.
In that regard,
like Ridley Scott, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, do you feel like Ridley Scott is doing that now with executive producing the new Fede Alvarez movie and the Noah Hawley?
I don't know. Hard to say. I guess we'll have to wait till we see it, see what those are. Because right now we've only really seen 2 movies in terms of the new era of Alien, right? And opinions vary on how successful that's been, but at least they seem consistent. They seem like there's a style and certainly a thematic material that's consistently across those 2 films. I don't know if the new FX series will touch upon that at all. I doubt the new Fede Alvarez movie is going to touch upon that. I might be wrong, but I don't know, man. I'm in the same boat as you guys on the new stuff. I'm just kind of like waiting to see what happens. Everything I've heard is either confidential or so far out, it's kind of hard to take seriously. But hopefully it's good. So there's like 20 guys falling from the ceiling on fire in this sequence.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I feel like half the prisoners are in hoodies and dropping from the ceiling.
Charles, what are your thoughts on the high-speed camera sequence that we just saw?
Oh, I mean, it was dazzling for me, because I was so enthralled by the film. I just thought, wow, that is a really interesting moment to just stop and make us pay attention to. I almost feel like some people in the audience thought it was a mistake. Like they thought, wait, the projector stopped? What happened? I thought it was great. I loved it. And it's just so weird how just visually it's so different than anything else in the film as well. I'm trying to think if Fincher's done that in other movies of his, where there's been like this one outlier, like shot that's either the technique of it or the look of it or whatever is just completely different than the rest of the movie. Nothing's coming to mind exactly, but
I think the beginning of Fight Club is maybe an example of that, right?
The titles or the gun on the nose
shots going.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So here's Junior sacrificing himself. Is that his redemption arc?
Yeah. We should have added like some ADR of him saying, "I'm sorry, I tried to rape you," as he runs away. I've given up policing social media to explain it's a rod puppet and not bad CG. There's too many people out there just think it's bad CG. I tried though. I tried to explain. I made a meme of it even just to say there's only one CG shot in the movie. People don't care.
Catching the alien is such a fantastic idea because as an audience member, it makes you think, well, wait, what's, the runtime? We're not at the end of the film yet. So I don't know.
It's like John Doe turning himself in 7, to go to another Fincher movie. It's kind of like, that's plenty of movie left after that.
Yep.
That's what makes it so unsettling, is that it's, you have to wonder, like, well, what else, it was like the Batman, even though it's 3 hours long, I felt like it kind of ended, but like, I felt like there's still plenty of stuff to cover that we haven't covered. And then sure enough, there's like a whole other hour of movie left. But like, what, you have the time code on this, right? Like, where are we at in the film?
Oh,
our host is taking a bathroom break, so we
I see.
can't scroll over to the moment. This is Verite, people. This is live.
This is winging it.
Yeah, we are winging it right now.
I love those crossfades. Jamie, what's the time stamp?
Yeah, so we're halfway through the movie, basically.
An hour and 24 minutes in.
Yeah, these dissolves are awesome. I think they're so beautiful. And again, unlike anything we've really seen in Alien movies before. I mean, that during the funeral scene with the three faces of Andrews, Ripley, and Clemens, it just, to me, that was like out of Apocalypse Now. I was just so hypnotizing.
Apocalypse Now and Alien 3 have significantly more in common than I think people realize. Not just the production that you were alluding to earlier, Charles, but a lot of the feel of the movie, the sense of like abandonment, the sense of what happens at like an extreme of human nature when things go wrong. I think we even have like a Kurtz figure. But I think I mentioned that in my previous commentary track. There's a lot of narrative similarities too between the movies.
Who are you saying is the Kurtz figure in this?
Andrews, right? Because he's this big fish he's become like a sort of a local god to these men, and that he doesn't need weapons, but he has like complete control over them, just by virtue of the power that he wields because of his position. There's something that feels kind of Kurtzian to me. Do you disagree with that?
I think it's a really interesting idea. I'm trying to because whenever I hear of comparisons like that and parallels, I'll probably now be quiet for the entire rest of the movie because I'm going to be thinking about this. So thanks.
But he has to wait for Dylan to say it's okay for the meeting to end, for the men to leave. That's my point. Only.
Yeah. No, as I was saying it, I was thinking he appears to have complete power, but Dylan actually is the one who wields it.
So at 85, you could say is like Dennis Hopper, like the fool, in a way.
There we go. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Why does Morse live? 85 should have lived. And I know Patrick and I have fought over this because Patrick says, well, the fact that 85 doesn't live, is because he's the obvious choice, that he's the guy that ought to get out. And I realized on this viewing that they actually say Morse's name right at the beginning. When he talks about taking the vow, someone says, "Shut up, Morse." So we do establish his name early on.
Well, but 85 needed his own little redemption in a way. Like he was so sort of like perceived to be worthless and cowardly that he then, stood up in the very end, that gives him a little bit of an arc. And Morris's last line, I think, is an appropriate send off for this whole film. When the Wailing Tiny Troopers are moving along, he's like, "Fuck you," or whatever. This is a great way to end the film.
There's the iPhone we were talking about last time.
It's a mirror.
It's a Samsung Galaxy, I think. Note.
Here's the family photo.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wait, and out of that shot, you saw a superhero costume or whatever, or was there another shot elsewhere?
This guy named Charles de Lauzirika put together these fantastic behind-the-scenes features, and one of them had the photo.
I'll have to look this stuff up. Sounds good.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
I love that tracking shot into this scene. It reminded me of Alien when the ship is just waking up and then it's going to wake up.
And then similarly, it's followed by an interface readout, right? Which is also the way it plays out in Alien too. That's interesting, Jimmy. I hadn't thought of that.
Can you imagine if this is the way computer interfaces are going to be in the year 2179?
It feels rugged though, like it's not going to break. Like,
right?
Maybe you reduce things down. Here's that scene you were talking about, though.
Yeah, no, this performance in this moment is great. So creepy,
and that door is fantastic.
Yeah, this is great. Look at him.
Does Apocalypse Now have a Gallic? Silence.
I'm trying to think.
I have to think about that. I haven't seen it in a while. I love the fact that in these movies, certainly with Alien 3, and even they could have done this with Aliens, they don't update the tech. The tech is all congruous. Even though these are different visions, it still has that cassette futurism, which we saw even in the prequels. There was this uneven quality to it, where one film looked really far in advance, the other one kind of took a step back. Whereas these three films, even Resurrection on its face, kind of falls in line with this as well. It's that cassette futurism.
Mm-hmm.
And just going back to that moment that Charlie was alluding to in the beginning, when Gallic fumbles with the knife after he kills the other prisoner, that really is it's a great moment. That it's such a complicated character who is so vivisected in the original cut of the movie. There's an Apocalypse Now shot if I've ever seen an Apocalypse Now shot.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Can you explain that moment to us? Actually,
what the strange monkey alien?
Yeah. What's going on there?
That was in the assembly cut. We didn't do that one. So that was there were a few shots, visual effect shots that were somewhat completed, and we didn't dare touch those because we thought everything that was actually worked on by the original team was holy, even if it was unholy. We still kept it. And plus we had so many other shots we had to do, so we let it slide because that was what they did. You know, we're trying to document the process and the different versions and try to be truthful, so there's no cheating going on. So that would have been a cheat had we touched that one.
Yeah, which I think makes a lot of sense. But was that the puppet in that shot? Do you know?
Yeah, for sure.
That was the puppet. Okay.
It wasn't Tom Woodruff.
It was, yeah.
It was the dog, I think, actually.
I was going to say it was either a puppet or someone threw a piece of chewing gum out the door, and that was kind of it. Because that's probably the least convincing shot of the alien in the entire film, and that's an assembly cut shot on top of it. So,
right. Jamie, your point about technology and interfaces, I think is really well taken. And I think it also says a lot about the kinds of technology that would be used in the sorts of worlds that we spend the first three films in, right? Because we have the truck, we have the military, and we have the prison. And there's still Commodore 64s powering things, in our own country today. So there's a hardiness to that aesthetic that I think makes sense. And I guess it even makes sense for Prometheus and Covenant in some ways for them to look so different, because applicationally speaking, the technology is very different. But from a visual standpoint, yeah, it definitely throws me off.
Well, I mean, you could argue that, if Nostromo is basically a big pickup truck and Sulaco is a military vehicle and this is a prison colony, and then you go to the expensive Lamborghini of spaceships with Prometheus, of course it would have more fancier and sophisticated and more bling to it than these kind of more, rugged kind of like, Home Depot worlds that we're kind of in with the original films. I can't remember. What does the Resurrection do anything interesting with their graphics?
No, they look more specific. They look more Battlestar Galactica than the other ones do, but it also takes place hundreds of years after this. So
I just remember that ridiculous whiskey cube that gets lasered into a glass, and it's like, what? Why?
I was just checking the Star Picks baseball card, whatever you want to call it, for Golic, and it lists him as 32 counts of murder and dismemberment. That's curious what he was in for, yeah, and arson, 13 counts. But just you get the sense that he hasn't murdered anyone since he joined the religion, and although they accuse him of murdering the other guys, this is the first time he's actually done it.
That's so weird, though, because when he's asking Ripley about, why don't you get married, have kids, and he says that he knew a bunch of girls back home, I took that to mean something completely different. given the rest of the prisoners, I thought, he was a bad boy. But it makes more sense to be someone who kind of was a butcher and an arsonist. That's more Golic-y sounding.
Yeah. I love how clean the EEV is now. Like someone went in and polished it all up and replaced the glass. It's no longer broken.
Oh, man, you're right.
Yep.
Screw this movie. I'm done with it.
There's still the burn marks on the outside.
Yeah.
You can't get those off. It's the same in Alien, though. Someone had to have gone in and cleaned up John Hurt's bloody mess, because the next time we see the galley set, it's clean. So who did that?
It had to be Lambert. I'm sure she cleaned it up like happily.
Whistling.
No, it had to be Ash. I'm sure it was Ash,
collecting samples.
Exactly.
So this is also the scene that proves that they didn't have to do an autopsy on Newt. They could have just put her right in here and scanned her.
Yeah. Man, this film's collapsing as the further we get into it. It's falling apart.
1 star.
And I love the low-tech reconstruction of a high-tech concept, how they built the insides of a Ripley and photographed it.
So I wonder, so let's just go back to the Newt could have been bioscanned. Mm-hmm. So she's in the morgue. Ripley comes in and says, we have to take her back to the EEV to bioscan her. And they say, why? Well, because she had cholera. Is that too much of a stretch to have them take this little girl's body across where all these rapists are and everything, where Ripley herself almost got raped? Is that's a rough walk to take. I don't know.
I doubt she could have talked them into carrying the body out of the morgue. So
and also I think there was an immediacy to her concern where at that point she needed to verify if this was going to be an immediate situation. So if they weren't going to go to the EEV, then they might as well just do the autopsy right now.
And the other thing is everyone now believes her about the alien. So there's that to consider, I guess. But no, you're right. That's kind of a weird bump.
I love that it's upside down.
Yeah.
It's actually it's an Apocalypse Now reference. I don't know if one of the things that I find most fascinating about Alien 3 is how restricted the color palette is. Obviously for the entire film, except for some very specific deviances from that, right? There's the autopsy scene. There's some other moments, the EV is an example of that, the hospital ward. But another example though is Dutton's fire axe in this. It's like a canary. It's not a canary. It's like a scarlet red color, right? And And it just sings visually. It's just so look at that. It just pops so hard because we see no red other than blood basically for the entire movie. Other than that,
I know Fincher has kind of an aversion to the color red because I think I was at a screening of Benjamin Button that he did a Q&A at afterwards, and they were talking about color palettes, and he mentioned red, and he said, like, I hate red unless it's splattered up against a wall or something like that. So he was kind of like, he obviously likes violence to use red, but that's one of the chapters in Wreckage and Rage. It's called The Color of Blood because Fincher's so picky about what blood should look like on screen, and they go through a variety of colors of blood to get it right. And then I also think about The Shining, actually, because if you look at The Shining, the color red doesn't really show up unless it's a supernatural moment. So I'm wonder if that's kind of his version of, a power color used very minimally. Because I don't believe we see even the blood scenes in this are pretty brownish. But that's not because of the blood; it's because of the overall way the film is shot and colored. But yeah, it seems like it's mostly browns, mostly grays, then later really rich kind of amber. I miss anything? Is there any other big, strong color sequence in the film that departs from that?
No, that's it. I mean, even the exterior satellite shots are amber colored, right? The whole thing is just awash with that. Now,
you guys have caught the Tyrell building in the background of, it wasn't that shot, but there's the other like big surface shot. So Tyrell building's way back there. And then one of the cranes is an X-Wing. That's also like that's hauling some of actually, I think it's the crane that's hauling the EV in the beginning. The support, like the top part of it is an X-Wing, or originally was anyway, because we have the footage in the documentary and we couldn't reference it by name for rights issues, which now is not a problem given studios that bought each other. But yeah, we had to be careful about that on Blade Runner as well, because the Millennium Falcon and Dark Star both show up in one of the effect shots. So in this one, I was told to steer clear again.
So that crane shot would be in the theatrical cut.
Correct. I'm not sure it's that shot. I have to look at it again, but I do know there's a crane that uses an X-Wing nose, or the whole like snub part of it, the front part of it, as like the basis of the crane.
I have to see this. That is great. Especially we're recording this on May the 4th, everybody. So this is especially close to my heart right now.
I saw some close-up shots of the exterior model recently that had little miniature vehicles even along one side that you never see that detail in the movie, but it's just neat to see. And again, implies that this place was much larger and not just for prisoners.
Yeah.
The newspaper a second ago had a Japanese headline. I thought that was neat on the wall.
And by the way, going back to Outland for a second, it's like I feel like, Outland presents this vast industrial complex used for mining or whatever they were doing, but then there's also a prison section, right? They got the zero gravity cells that the guys are floating in. So it's kind of like, it's interesting. I do wonder what the rest of Fury 161 was like when it was properly up and running as a Weyland-Taney industrial facility, whatever work they were doing, that just happened to need a prison section because they're hiring these kind of roughnecks to do work that they work hard, they play hard, and then suddenly they got to go to jail because they did something. Okay, this blew my mind that Weyland-Yutani has like faster than light ships. They can get there in 2 hours. After saying originally it was gonna be 6 weeks, and then like 2 weeks, then 2 hours, whatever it was. But it's crazy, like expediting arrival team 2 hours.
But I think that speaks to what we've been talking about with the technology, which is Weyland-Yutani they will cut any corner they can find to cut, right?
Yeah.
But they have access to things like we see in Prometheus. They're just not that we're not getting it here.
But we never really get a sense in any of the films, and correct me if I'm wrong, that faster than light travel is in play. Like that's not, that's just cruising on up to the planet, right? And all the films have had that same kind of shot where we see a slow approach, and it's really cool, but I guess you could argue, well, the faster than light sequence took place before that. But I've never gotten a sense that FTL was in play in any of these films, and it had to be given the expanse of distance that they've had to cover.
Yeah, you can't terraform with an afterburner.
No.
I wish they could have built a new ship instead of reusing the Sulaco from the previous film, but they do a good enough job.
Yeah. Is it ever established what the name of this ship is?
The Patna.
The
Which
Patna.
It's another Joseph Conrad reference.
Joseph Conrad wrote Heart of Darkness, which inspired
Boom.
Apocalypse Now. I just want to say,
Boom. There you go. It's coming together.
A lot of authors have jumped on that bandwagon. So there's been at least one USS Kurtz for another ship.
And of course,
I included the Kurtz as a ship in the Nostromo dossiers I wrote for the first Alien DVD as an Easter egg.
You broke my heart, by the way, that you wrote those.
Sorry.
I wrote you recently about it.
No, I know. Well, that's the tricky thing about it. Is like we looked for the originals and we couldn't find them, and then they turned up many, many years later. But back then we didn't have it, and so Ridley just said, do whatever. Just write your own. I basically said, is this okay to include? And he goes, yeah, it's fine. So too bad you can't find the ones I wrote. And I said, yeah, it is too bad we looked. But then later they found them.
When you were finished with this restoration, did you have to get a final approval?
No. I mean, Fox approved it, I guess. And everything goes through legal. So legal approved whatever they had to approve. But no, Fincher bowed out. Well, actually never jumped in. He was like, no, he just completely, said no at the earliest part of this, because he was the first person we obviously reached out to. And just basically said, it's not my movie. Do whatever you want. So, and again, that's why I always tried to stay truthful to whatever it is they were doing back then versus just doing my own thing. Because I know other people would have just done their own thing. And I felt like that was inappropriate, even if he didn't want to be involved.
I think that's probably why the assembly cut has become so beloved by people. And I have to say, as you probably know, because I talk about it quite a bit, I tend to go for the theatrical version just because to me it's tighter. But having now watched this quite a bit recently, this is growing on me. It might be my favorite cut of the film. And I think it's because it still feels very much true to the vision of the movie, because you didn't do that. You didn't screw around with it.
Well, I mean, there's fingerprints on it from Terry Rawlings and Fincher that, no matter how unsatisfied they might be with this version, because obviously it was in progress and it wasn't, complete. It still came from them in some form at some stage. Which if I had gone the fan edit way, it would have been just like, it might have had everything in it. It might have been somewhat interesting, but it wouldn't have had that authenticity that this one has, for better or worse. And I think for better, actually. I really do think that a lot of the choices that are only in this version are really, fascinating. And I, whether they work or not in the grand scheme of things, I still love watching them. I still love seeing it in action. Especially after many years of not seeing it, of like wishing that there would be a new cut or a longer cut or whatever. Because, I think back to when I was in film school in the early 90s and this film came out, but shortly thereafter, a friend of mine got a bootleg VHS of the cut they test screened, which is different than the work print or the assembly cut rather. And, seeing that, I realized, there's definitely more to this. Like there's potential here that it might not be realized fully, but it's there under the wreckage of everything. So from that point, like from the early 90s up until I got to actually, work on this project, I was always fantasizing about there being this mythical lost version of Alien 3 that would fix everything, or at least, bring it to its full potential. And, I think what we found was really cool and very, satisfying as kind of an archaeological dig of a movie, and I definitely think it's better in many ways than the theatrical cut. And I'm glad people seem to enjoy it. I mean, every once in a while, I'll just check Twitter to see what the chatter is on the assembly cut, and it's all these people saying, "Oh, well, you haven't seen Alien 3 unless you've seen the assembly cut or some version of that." And I always think that's amusing, and it's nice to see, I guess. But I'm glad that people have embraced it. Although I have to say, I think a small percentage of them are embracing it only because it's different, because it's like something that's not the original. Like they want to be in that cool kids crowd. Because I'm not sure they really know the differences, but they, I'll take, the bandwagon is big enough for everybody. So I'll just say that. Look at those things, those things we just saw on the left. Did you see those kind of like iron bits of decor that looked almost like Spanish, like almost like conquistador looking stuff? Did you spot that before?
I didn't see it.
Like the wrought iron over on the side?
Yeah, they look like little, but there's bits of decor that's not part of the bars.
No, I didn't see that.
It almost looked like a conquistador helmet or something, but maybe I'll see it again. I'll point it out. But see, that's the thing. Is like every time I watch this film, I see something new. Come on, tilt down. Let's see.
I think I actually saw it for a flash when he drew the axe back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
It was so fast, I didn't want to point it out, but yeah. A little bit of it there. That's not what I'm talking
there.
about.
Yeah.
There it is, like that. What is that?
That looks like the like the cross from like you see in the fountain, right? Like reminds me a lot of those scenes in the fountain, actually. Which we are about to do a Sublime Noise episode on for our patrons listening. It looked almost Aztec.
Mm-hmm.
And there's brickwork. I just can't imagine bricks being sent from Earth. It's just.
I mean, they could have been milled there, right? I mean, they could.
I guess so. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right, look at those Coke bottles. See those things?
Yep. And we get a good close up in a minute.
I just like how perfectly organized they are for the inevitable shot of 85 drinking a Coke bottle. But it just seems like that's such a Fincher commercial type of thing to do, just to have Coke ready to go. Coca-Cola, I mean.
And yet Pepsi got the tie-in deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
That shot of 85 logo facing out. So funny.
One of the guys down on the ground has what appears to be a medical kit with a needle, like he's got morphine or something to inject. Why Ripley doesn't consider lethal injection, I don't know. Or just walk out onto the planet.
Well, I mean, there's oxygen, right? I mean, because Clemens brought her in.
True. She could drown herself. I don't know.
Well, also, if we're taking continuity from the assembly cut, the alien can still come from a dead host organism, right?
That's true.
The only way to really make sure is to burn yourself to death. Maybe.
There you go. With the injection.
Danny Webb is such a good actor too. He makes so much of every scene that he's in this movie. It's a great cast.
I love that moment. I forget who he runs into, but when they're chasing around and like they bump into each other and like there's that moment of levity in the middle of all this. Just it's a nice choice, nice little moment to have.
Yeah, and they laugh about it, which is great.
Shows like history between the characters.
Yeah.
All that talk about like, it's a bunch of bald guys. I can't tell who's who. It's like, I think there's plenty of distinction between these characters. Like if you really break it down visually, they're all different. Yeah, they're all bald, but each one has like their own little thing. It's like saying the Colonial Marines are all the same because they're all wearing armor. It's like I think it was just a lazy criticism this film got. Look at that. 4 different looking guys completely.
Well, and as the movie goes on, this is something we talked with Sarah Welch Larson about. You know, the movie starts with them so depersonalized because they really do look almost identical in the early stages of the movie. And then as it goes on and they get injured, I mean, you have Morse with his chain there. You know, you have Jude with the cigarette he's putting out. Yeah, they all get these little visual cues that differentiate them. And I think it's part of the repersonalization of their journey. I think they're coming back into being human beings again. And I think we see that visually, you know, and of course we see Charles S. Dutton with the fucking beautiful fire red axe there. It's another example of just like a visual cue that differentiates him, that sets him apart, that makes us notice him as an individual, not just part of this faceless mob.
That previous shot, Ripley had her back to us. Do you remember that? We just passed it. I don't know if you noticed it. It's such a weird place for her to be, like, with her back so deliberately to us. Do you think that was a double? Like Sigourney wasn't available and they got a double?
I don't know.
It just seemed like a bizarre bit of blocking or whatever to me that I never caught before.
How big was her head? Can you That's one way to find out.
So the Weyland-Yutani patches that are on the jackets of the guards, the wardens, are embroidered, and the patches that are on the prisoners' jackets are screen printed. So there's already, just in that little detail, there's a mass produced versus a slightly more, you know, I don't know how to put that better, but just interesting details.
Like a class difference between insignia.
You know, not that embroidery is hugely expensive, but the embroidery is saved only for the minders, and the Gen Pop has to just use screen printed ones.
I love this shot here of them standing in front of the whatever that opening is, with that long red opening. It just looks like a church. It's a cathedral, but it's a kind of cathedral of death. It's just beautiful.
It's like that, plus almost like a cremation machine furnace.
And even the shape of it harkens back a little bit for me visually to the Nostromo's hallways. And I think that there's something that feels almost like an echo of that. And I think a lot of these final parts of this film do a beautiful job of not explicitly, but kind of subtly bringing us back on the Nostromo again with Ripley. So that by the time we come to the end of the movie, we felt like we've kind of returned home a little bit. But that could just be the way I'm watching it.
I think that's fair. I mean, I never thought of it that way, but I mean, obviously the final scene is pretty clear, but
even this, like these Steadicam shots walking down hallways like this, just, it feels like that looks exactly like the service bay on the Nostromo to me. They're right there, except for it doesn't have as much wires, you know?
Was that the first of the alien vision shots a second ago? Or have we not gotten those yet?
I don't think we've gotten them yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that was still widescreen.
Okay.
It needs to have that kind of fisheye distortion. Which apparently, by the way, not the fisheye distortion, but the operation of the Steadicam shot flipping around upside down was kind of an accident that happened on set. Fincher saw it and liked it. And
really?
He asked the Steadicam operator, "Can you do that when you're running?" He's like, "Yeah, for sure." And then he just did it, and then suddenly it became a thing they used.
Oh. So
I remember the shot getting a big groan in the theater opening day. It was like we saw the tail, and the audience kind of got apprehensive, and then the reveal of the rod puppet, and it was kind of like, it was kind of like his disappointment when they saw what it looked like.
Christian, a while ago, we were talking about scenes that show the alien overtly eating somebody. Is that the one that you were talking about?
One of them here. There's it definitely, you see like a mouthful of prisoner. I mean, I'm not, preaching any sort of gospel there. That's what people point to when they have their aliens in novels or comics eating humans. It's like, well, it's an Alien 3.
Yeah, but I'm curious about exactly what shot they're talking about, because to me, like that one,
I always thought that was it. Like I always thought that was the big eating shot that everyone referred to.
I think it's distracting how much pelvic thrusting is going on in this shot.
Well, I'm sure Giger loved that. Like Giger thought the pelvic thrusting was right on point.
Make it hump it more.
Yeah.
So there we go. There's that pancake lens.
Mm. That shot's okay. I don't think that's a bad
great
shot. That's really good. I am wondering why the alien isn't preparing these guys as potential hosts if it knows there's a queen on the way. Yeah. Why are these guys not being like resined up and cocooned?
There were plans for something like that, right? They call it the meat locker.
Hmm.
What was your approach in terms of dealing with the composite of the rod puppet? Was it something you guys tried to make it look a little bit better, or how did you even approach that?
Well, like I said, like that stuff was off limits. That was in the original cut, and that was not connected at all to the assembly material. And what little there was, like for instance, the Bambi Burster stuff, that was a CG alien, which I think looked pretty clean for the most part. And then anything that was assembly cut but had been developed as a rod puppet shot, we left as is, because again, that was like authentic, original visual effects work that we didn't want to, step all over with what we were doing.
Can you explain the chocolate alien to me?
What you just referred to, or what the shot was?
Why does it look like it's made out of chocolate in these shots?
Maybe it is. I don't know. certain things we just don't know.
But that is the puppet, right?
Yeah. No, this is pretty much everything you see except for the obvious, puppet. Like Tom Woodruff stuff, is the puppet. Like here comes the worst puppet shot of all time. Boom, that thing. Yeah. Oh my god. Oh.
But delicious.
Because on the commentary track on Alien 3, even Richard Edlund himself says like that shot sucks. He's like he knows like that was just they kind of screwed the pooch on that one, and it's a shame. But again, I'm sure schedule, budget, new technology. By the way, for all the grief the rod puppet stuff gets, you have to understand this Alien 3 hit at like the crossroads of optical and digital visual effects filmmaking. It wasn't quite ready for digital. And optical was getting pretty ho-hum in terms of what you could do. So they were obviously trying to push the envelope, and it just they weren't there yet. It was just too ambitious of a plan, and they didn't have the technology to support their ideas. So, I mean, I give them props for taking a big swing. It's just they weren't quite there yet with the technology.
And for what it's worth, for me, it, if anything, contributes to the dreamlike quality of a lot of the stuff. Like the fact that the alien doesn't look the same in consecutive shots. It's just disorienting, It's never really bothered me that much.
It bothered me just because it pulls me out of this film that I think is just wonderful. Especially in light of the first two films where the creature work is so great. It's so almost flawless. And then you go to the last one and it's like the ball was dropped, not intentionally, but.
Those grates above her head have a very Star Wars feel. Mm-hmm. The lozenge shape. May the Fourth be with you.
And also with you.
I'm glad this guy got a little more time in this cut, because I remember in the original cut when I saw him in theater, it was like, why are we spending so much time with this wimp who's just like breaking down all of a sudden? It's like, he's so like just sad. And why didn't we see this guy earlier? Because kind of came out of nowhere. I love this music cue right here, which I call the Weyland-Yutani theme, which I don't know if that's what Alien Goldenthal imagined, but that's the first time we hear this theme is when these guys show up. And I just love that it's so like big and overwhelming, and like it feels like I'm looking at a giant Weyland-Yutani skyscraper in music form. It's just like so big.
The pounding timpani and stuff.
Yeah, and we use that for the in the early shots on the surface when Clemens is carrying Ripley in, because there was no music in the assembly cut version, or finished music anyway. and we didn't get clear notes from anybody in regards to what the music was supposed to be in these new scenes. And because it was a big reveal shot of the Weyland-Yutani, facility for the first time, I thought, let's go with that theme, which was like one of my favorite themes in the movie. So that was my call, correctly or incorrectly, to go with that big Weyland-Yutani theme early on, to just kind of, it also raised the stakes of it. It's like, oh, something really big is happening. So it felt like the right thing to do. But we had heard a rumor that Fincher didn't want any music in the movie originally. And I don't know exactly who conveyed this message back and forth, but we heard through the kind of underground grapevine we had of, we didn't get notes. We didn't get any feedback. There's no interest at all, but occasionally we'd get a hint of a bit of information. And apparently someone asked Fincher, like, was there not supposed to be music in Alien 3? And he's like, who the hell said that? So we took that as there was supposed to be music, and therefore we put music in.
And he also worked with Elliott for over a year on the score. So this is a pretty long process.
And it's a fantastic score. It's absolutely magnificent. Everything Alien Golanthon does, I think, is incredible, but like this was just brilliant. Probably my favorite score of all the movies, to be honest, of all the Alien movies.
Yeah.
I forgot a major tie-in. The lead Japanese scientist of the Weyland-Yutani team that comes in, his name is Matsushita, and he comes back in a novel called Alien into Charybdis and has a rather major role. So that was a fun tie-in from this film.
Have you read all the tie-in books and comics and everything?
I get paid to. They pay me to read them. Okay.
I'm just curious if you actually have notched every single thing.
A ridiculous amount of them, yes.
Cool.
I would say I probably hit 80% to 85% of them in my lifetime. But there's some things out there that I come across and I'm like, shit, like a lot of like the S.D. Perry novels and things I need to like go back and catch up on. But anything in the last decade, I think between the three of us, we probably read all of it.
I love their gear that they have a cage they're bringing in.
Yeah, it looks like the shark cage from Jaws they're bringing along.
Well, and you check
I love these suits.
Each commando has a chainmail glove like a shark, like you'd use in a shark cage too.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, that's Matsushita.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really close to commissioning Terry English to make me one of these Weyland-Yutani trooper helmets because I just think they're so badass and beautiful and kind of like ancient looking too. I mean, they're really great. There's that scene we're talking about.
Yeah, a little character building. It's just great. The look of the commandos in particular, I think, is one of the more indelible visual cues from this movie, and it's amazing that it's featured so little in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting they bring back the pulse rifles from Aliens, but I would love to have seen these like commando uniforms show up in some other anything. I mean, have they shown up? I mean, I know there's been like action figures, but have they shown up in other games or comics or?
The video games never want to use the original styles. They always want to tweak everything. So we've had Weyland-Yutani soldiers, but they wear baseball caps. It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I love this look, and it has such a callback to the Nostromo spacesuits that Mobius designed.
Absolutely.
Plus, there's graffiti on them. So these guys have done other missions. They have kill counts and names and things.
I loved Alien Isolation. I thought that did a really great job of capturing what we know and love, but then taking it further. You know?
Yeah, it's
what were the robots called? Rego Joes, or what were they called? The Average Joes, or what?
Working
Joes.
Working Joes. Yeah, those guys were creepy as hell, and I loved them. They were so good.
Yep.
The guys know this, but my 8-year-old is currently playing it from the beginning for the first time. He's watched me play a lot of it, and we've done the DLC together. But it's getting to see him experience it, and that same sense of reverence for it is just. Maybe I'm a bad parent, but it's pretty amazing to watch him do that. It's a great.
My 9-year-old beat it, so I'm curious if Patrick's son is going to beat my son's record.
The race is on.
So that tail is amazing. It looks better. I don't know. Sometimes I can just look at the tail and ignore the rest of the rod puppet.
There's a chocolate.
Here's a question I have: is like, what if you were to take the Jaws approach of like using the barrels instead of the shark to show the shark? Is there something they could have come up with to create the impression the alien is there. And then of course you have all these like great Tom Woodruff shots where it's really him in the suit. But for all like the running stuff that they had to use the puppet because there's no other way to do it really, or even like that, is like there's some other like, and again, in addition to the POV shots, I just wonder if there's some other way to establish the alien on the move versus just showing the puppet, because it really does take you out of the movie. And even Jaws, the big rubber shark, occasionally it was okay because you bought into it because you were so immersed, because you didn't see the shark until like the second half of the movie. And even then you barely saw it, And I feel like this being the third movie, we already know kind of what the alien looks like for the most part, but is there some way to kind of convey like these brief glimpses? I think are awesome. I think they're really effective.
It's the problem going forward too, though, because now people expect that you'll see a lot of every monster because of the whole CGI thing. I don't know what we do in the future.
But also,
I'm for cutting back,
It's interesting that for a movie that's so visually dark, the creature is almost always shown completely lit, right? Except for these shots, like when Woodruff's in the chute. But all the rod puppet shots, they're very bright. Like the chocolate thing I was talking, like that it looks out of place because it's like so visually easy to see. So I wonder if even just darkening it, would help.
Maybe.
Does the raw footage of the rod puppet still exist?
With like the blue screen backgrounds, like the uncomped versions? I'm sure they do. I believe we had access to them because I think we used a bit in the documentary in Optical Fury on the visual effects chapter. But again, that was not our goal, so we didn't dwell on that because we had so many other things we had to do.
Yeah.
Like in hindsight, I wonder maybe we should have tried to do a little bit of a cleanup, kind of like what they did on Star Trek motion picture recently. But that was not our brief. And I really, again, we were working on 3 different alien movies simultaneously. And it's like, that's a lot to take on,
Yeah.
Especially when the director of the first one is actively involved. And it's like, we had to give him quite a bit of attention to make sure that, he was taken care of. So it's a lot. It's a miracle, frankly, we got it done as well as we did in the first pass. And then that Fox was so great to let us go in and do a polish on the Blu-ray. Like, I have no complaints basically about what was done creatively or in terms of restoration, because it was like a perfect storm, like where you had a studio that was willing to do it. You had the elements still around, and we found these lost cuts, and then we were able to kind of get to it. So we're going to start to see there's some LA footage, I believe. I think that's an LA shot. Just look at her head.
Do you have a preference on the ending?
That's a great question. I get why the non-chest, there's LA. I get why the non-chest burster version.
I'd say that's definitely LA right there.
Yeah. The non-chest burster version is better for the Fincher of it all, I guess, in terms of like what the original vision was and how it serves. I don't know. It's more uncomfortable because you don't have that closure. But I do think there's something to be said about showing that there's the one CG shot in the movie we just passed. There is something to be said about the satisfaction of knowing that she succeeded in what she was doing, for sure. Like absolute evidence. Like, yeah, she took that thing to its death with her. So I'm kind of 50-50, to be honest. Is Deckard a replicant? I don't know. Either way, it's fine. Do you have a preference?
I'm torn about it personally. I like the dignity of no alien, but symbolically, just the visual payoff of seeing it, I don't know.
I feel the same way.
How about you guys?
Jamie, you go.
I'm 50-50 too. I don't need to see the chest burster. I think it is more poetic to see her just go into the the lead, but they both work.
I prefer the theatrical, honestly. I think partly because my emotional connection to it is so strong, because it has just meant so much to me for my whole life before this version came out, so I feel kind of attached to it. But also I think because the way that it's shot with like that all encompassing, almost like she's jumping into the sun, to me feels, I don't know, more, it works for me a little bit better in the theatrical. I like this version of it quite a bit too, but that's one that I prefer.
So speaking of, is Deckard a replicant? Is Bishop human or droid? I think he's human, by the way. I've thought about it quite a bit. I've gone back and forth. I'm now in the human camp, in the Bishop Hume camp. How about you guys?
Well, the new retcon version is that he's a human who has augmented himself because he works in cybernetics or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that explains how he can survive an incredibly traumatic head wound.
It's like
Lance Henriksen says that the ear came from Jack Nicholson, but he says the wrong movie. He always says that it was from Batman. Well, I guess that tracks. Batman was a few years before this. Do you know anything about that? Whose ear Jack Nicholson? It was like a last minute decision,
right?
I think he's human, for what it's worth. I think it's just kind of a little bit of a clumsy makeup shot, but I think he's human.
I agree. I think he's human.
Because if they could make, synthetics with red blood just to make them more camouflaged, I guess they would have been doing it since the time of Ash. And certainly Bishop and Aliens, who had, the milk, he could have had red blood. So it's like, he has to be human.
And yet the credits say Bishop too. So that's where it all comes from.
Maybe it's Bishop the Second. Maybe it's,
Bishop Jr.
TOO.
He's pretty creepy here, though, I gotta say. It's very...
I'm not convinced Lance Henriksen isn't synthetic.
Yeah.
They don't use the same sound effect for the pulse rifles. Mm-hmm. Which is fine. But they went to the trouble of rebuilding them. Bapti was involved, but
there's so much aliens in this movie that I don't think it gets enough credit. How much Bishop is present. We talked about this before. How much Newt and Hicks are present. How much this film is a kind of a long grief of aliens in its own way. Poor 85.
He's 86 now.
Well played. Well played.
We're going to get the big video camera in a second.
Yeah.
And Bishop says, stop recording or something. It's very strange.
Like no cameras?
Panavision.
No, yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's like a home video camera from late 80s.
It's like, it's got to be like super like 4D and like, some kind of, got like 8 lenses inside of it.
Look at that fucking head wound. That is rough.
Yeah. So we had a bit of a problem with, the visual effect shot of Ripley falling into the fire, which was that the alternate element of her falling in without the chest burster coming out was shot, very like smoothly in terms of the frame rate. So it didn't have that like staccato step frame look that the theatrical cut had. So we artificially added it in here, because it looked like the fakest, stupidest thing going in smooth, going in like 24 frames, just normal. And by adding that little bit of staccato, it kind of called back to the theatrical cut but it seemed again more stylized and more poetic and blah blah blah. So I've had people tell me like, why didn't you fix that? It's like, well, again, we were trying to stay truthful to the creative process that was happening, but we didn't have the original footage that was clean going in.
The distance seems so much more believable in that cut. She falls and then she hits, and then the other one, it just keeps falling.
Yeah.
But that is why I love the theatrical cut ending so much, is because it feels like it goes into the realm of like dreams again. It's just like sort of a larger than reality moment, He's such a good actor.
See, this is just the perfect way to end like this trilogy of films. It's like, there shouldn't have been more after this, in my opinion, but at least in terms of there should have been a resurrection, is what I'm saying, or AVPs, because like this is such a beautiful ending to what was like nice, nice put together, not perfect, but still coherent trilogy of birth, life, and death.
Totally agreed.
Resurrection and the two AVPs feel like their own trilogy, just with the tone and the look of it all.
Right. Yeah, I buy that. They definitely feel like films made for Aliens fans who are gamers, who are more into like the shoot 'em up, lock and load, kick ass version of the Alien universe, which is fine. It's like there's, again, I get the appeal of Aliens as like a badass, let's go kill some bugs movie. It's just not what I signed up for as a kid, 11-year-old seeing Alien for the first time at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. Like that scarred my brain. Like that was the Alien universe for me. And Aliens kind of got back to some of that, but still adding all this other kind of like fun to it. So to come back to Alien 3 and end with Alien 3 was, again, for me, it's nice closure. And then what went beyond with Resurrection and AVP movies felt like it was just giving Aliens fans more of what they really wanted from Aliens. Even if it wasn't as good, it was still like, let's go kill some bugs, I get it. It's just different. It's different flavors for different customers, there's no downside to it. Just so long as everyone gets served, it's great. I don't know, it's kind of a shame that it's looking like there might not be a third movie in the Prometheus cycle, but just to see how that resolved. I'm sure we could all kind of guess or imagine, based on David's last actions and the whole biomechanoid of it all, where maybe he would, create the alien that we know and love as being like fully biomechanoid versus more of a creature that we've seen over the last several films. But who knows? I guess we'll see where it goes. That's the thing, is like there's so many different ways now to tell stories. You don't have to be just features. It doesn't have to be TV. It could be games or comics or all these other things that have already been explored. But why not do it with like the creator of the original film, who's obviously got more to say about it? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, like you said with Alien Isolation, I never expected a video game to be so faithful and immersive and also expand the world like that. So that opened my eyes.
Totally agree.
Yeah, Alien Isolation was to me like the first thing since the original films came out that I felt that deeply passionate about from an alien standpoint. And I think a lot of it is like that mixture of reverence and willingness to take risks with the storytelling, to play with the sacred cows that we got used to, but also just the fact that like when you play, for example, the Last Survivor content, or not the Last Survivor, the Crew Expendable content, you can actually recreate, like we did this on Alien Day. We recreated the first like 10 minutes of Alien by just being in this ship and like walking around the bay and going into the mother room. So there's like, that sense of complete immersion in this material is just like incredibly good. That being said, though, I think we've seen, especially with the Alex White novels, Into Charybdis, one that Christian just mentioned being their more recent one, but also before that, Alien: The Cold Forge. That's another great example of somebody who just understands on a really deep thematic level how you can push the boundaries of alien storytelling. And I feel, especially with Noah Hawley and Fede Alvarez, that we're actually in really good hands at the moment. I worry somewhat about the studio, because they've really closed themselves off so much to fans and giving access to us, even just for, feedback. That being said, like, it's not their job to do that necessarily, and I'm sure that they have other plans. But I mean, we're recording this on Star Wars Day, and I don't know about all of you, but I do know that you're all Star Wars fans, as am I. It's been every angle has been Star Wars bombarding us all day. And we had the Obi-Wan full trailer come out, and we had, all of these emails and push notifications from major news outlets. And I know that Alien and Star Wars are very different, and that the size of the audience is completely different. And I understand that, and I don't argue with that whatsoever. But it would have been nice to have just some acknowledgement on Alien Day of us out here in love with this franchise, and we didn't get anything. So I'm, optimistic about the future, but I'm also realizing that I have very little say in that future. And it's a little bit of just a strange moment to be a fan, I think.
Well, it's just a lack of acknowledgement, really, more than it is them throwing us anything or throwing the fans anything. Just a lack of acknowledgement since Fox was taken over, which I think is frustrating for sure.
Well, maybe they're just still trying to figure things out, and maybe they want to wait until they've got something to tease, like seriously, like wait until the new show is in production, or wait until the new movie's in production, and have something like maybe for next year on Alien Day they'll have something, or Comic-Con, or whatever. I don't know what their plans are, but I would imagine they wouldn't want to get people excited until there was something to follow it up with, until the actual thing comes out. Because that's one thing I've always noticed about movie marketing, is that you can get people riled up and excited pretty easily, but you need to feed that beast. You need to keep that vein tapped. You got to just keep it going. And if you don't have it, you've squandered that initial impulse that people indulged in, the excitement of it. That you're going to lose that. So I don't know. I think there's a plan for everything. It's just it sucks that it's not as normalized as maybe like Star Wars or Star Trek or anything else. But maybe it'll get there. We'll see. Maybe if there's excitement about the new show and the new movie, maybe it'll be a renaissance of some kind for Alien.
Wouldn't that?
By the way, we totally off the tape now. Are we still recording?
The file's done. We're still recording.
We'll go ahead and close. But I guess, before we do, I have one last question for you, Charles. And I also want to say to people, Blade Runner has come up quite a bit tonight. And it's not only because we also have a Blade Runner podcast. It's because Charles de Lauzirika happens to be not only a Blade Runner super fan, but also the reason why we have the final cut. He worked with Ridley Scott on that. And there's amazing stories behind that, which you can hear on our other show. And he was at our live event in LA in 2019 and has been on, multiple times as a guest. So I want to just, give you credit for that. He's like the authority on it, which is really, really cool. But speaking of Blade Runner, my question for you is, Jordan Cronenweth is thanked at the end there in the credits. Can you give us a little window into why?
Well, Jordan Cronenweth, who's, probably my favorite cinematographer ever, was the original DP on Alien 3. Fincher was a huge fan of his and brought him in. And I believe he might have shot the Coke commercial, the Blade Runner rollerblade commercial that Fincher directed, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that. But anyway, so Cronenweth was the DP for the first number of days. I don't know if it went into weeks, but it was long enough that they realized that he was ill and not well enough to continue, because he was just operating at kind of a slower pace than anyone else was, and that they could afford. And if you watch Wreckage and Rage, there's a section we devote to Jordan Cronenweth and working with Fincher, and you can see Fincher is uncharacteristically very soft and delicate and sympathetic with him, and almost like a son talking to his elderly father or whatever. Like there's a sweetness to it. There's a very sweet relationship between the two in just those few minutes of footage, where you can tell that Fincher's worried not just about the film but about Jordan himself. So as was discovered, I think around the time of Blade Runner, that he had Parkinson's. And he was slow on Blade Runner as well. That was definitely a problem with Blade Runner going over schedule. It wasn't just Ridley being a perfectionist; it was Jordan was slow. But luckily they were allowed to finish the film with him. There were other cinematographers came in to pick up little things here and there, but Jordan shot most of it, and that's why that film looks as amazing as it does. So it was just kind of a sad thing that Jordan was misdiagnosed with having something else and not Parkinson's, that he was never treated correctly early enough on. And I'm not sure if Alien 3 was the last film he worked on as like full DP for a feature, but it was one of the last ones. So I'm glad we got to talk about that a bit, because, some of his shots that are on the finished film are gorgeous. And Alex Thompson mentions that in the documentary, that, when they had to replace him and Alex came in and they watched all the dailies that they had shot. Apologies. They watched all the dailies, and Alex was sort of like, wow, how am I going to match this? Like, this is so great. And Alex Thompson is a phenomenal cinematographer. He was, when he was with us, and he shot Legend for Ridley. So, really tremendous cinematographer in his own right. But he, you could tell, like, he was like daunted by, having to follow in Jordan's footsteps. Even Jordan, not in his best shape, is still one of the master cinematographers of all time.
Yeah, and the fact that his name comes right there at the very end of the credits is it's very special for those of us who loved and admired his work.
No, absolutely, and again, it's a sadness that he couldn't finish the whole thing, but I thought Alex Thompson did an amazing job in picking up where he left off, and of course Fincher kind of running roughshod over all that, because he's also an amazing photographer as director. That was I guess that was one of the big insults the studio brass were lobbing at Fincher was he's a great shooter. He's a great shooter. And it's like, as if he wasn't a great storyteller, as if he wasn't a great actor's director, which he is, so it's just interesting that that's a derogatory term. They call him a shooter, which is putting him in the same league in this case with Jordan Cronenweth and Alex Thompson. What else you got?
Well, that's all that I have.
Yeah, I think I want to be, you've been so incredibly gracious to spend 3 hours with us tonight on this commentary track. I guess my final thing would be, both you and Christian, thank you very much, had corrections for us on our previous commentary. Do you remember? Did we miss any of them tonight? Because we're a hard hitting journalism podcast here. We need to get the facts right. I'm okay being fact checked. What do you got?
Well, he kind of corrected us earlier, like I mentioned in our previous commentary about the notes from Fincher, but there were no notes from Fincher, but I of course had heard that, and whatever just confused it. So I don't know what else there was.
Well, you guys were talking about when we find Ripley on the beach covered in oil, being a dummy. And while there may have been a dummy made, that was Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah. The dummy was used for Charles Dance to carry, as he was running into the facility. But all those shots of Ripley on the beach, that was Sigourney Weaver on the beach.
Which makes it even more unfortunate that they didn't make the theatrical cut of the movie, because she had to be covered in garbage on a beach in the cold,
Well, apparently, I only heard this recently that the lice, is that what they are? Like, I forget what the things are, the bugs that got thrown on her. I don't think they're actually lice. They must have been something else.
They're called lice in the movie, but they're clearly not, because they're.
That's what I'm saying. It's I don't know what the actual bugs were.
Yeah.
But apparently she got a mouthful of those in the first dump, and she was not too happy about that for being early on, day one, or probably day one or two. But that's the only thing I know about her relationship with the bugs. But no, that was definitely her on the beach.
That opening is very bizarre, how she was physically ejected from the entire EEV. And so the reshoot makes sense for that. But my God, the production value that they'd already spent the money and then they cut it out of the movie and reshoot. It's hard. It hurts my soul when you see how beautiful and how expansive it makes that world. Because the rest of the movie were entirely within that facility. So to get that little breathing room is really nice.
Yeah, no, I agree. In regards to how she got out of EEV and onto the beach, look, there are leaps of faith when you're telling a story, and there's all kinds of just suspension of disbelief when you have to get from point A to point B. It's how did Indiana Jones get from the Nazi sub to the base before the sub got there. Like, how did that happen? Forget how he survived being on a sub for 5 days. How did he swim faster than the sub to get to the base? It's okay, because by that point we love Indy and we're along for the ride. Ripley, we've already been through hell with her twice, and it's kind of like, it's a ship, it crashed, she got ejected, she hit the beach, or maybe she just like fell right out into the water and the tide took her into the beach. It's like, we don't need to be asking these questions. A better question is, how did the egg get on the Sulaco? And I don't know if you caught this, but in the menus we made for the anthology, we tried to address that. I mean, have you paid attention to the menus on the Alien 3?
I've seen that, yeah.
So it's like, if you watch, it's like each disc is color coded. Like Alien is green, Alien is blue, and then Alien 3 is kind of like amber.
Yellow, yeah.
But we break the color rule just once across all 6 of those discs when it goes to like red alert. And then we see, alien infestation on the Sulaco. And we try to like cobble together clips from Aliens to show the egg sac. And then, we tried our best. That's the best we could do to patch that hole. But I hope that people took it with the tongue-in-cheek, sentiment was offered, because it's just like, it was not meant to be taken seriously or as canon. But I get nailed on it all the time. Like with the little merging of Ridley verses between Tyrell and Wayland in the Prometheus Blu-ray, where I kind of wrote them together in the same universe without mentioning names, but people totally got it. And everyone's like saying, "Oh, it's canon now. It's absolutely canon." And I have to always go say, "No, it's a little joke. Lighten up. Lighten up, Francis."
Well, thank you, Charles.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on.
Was this good? Was this interesting at all? Because I feel like
yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Stuff I've never heard before. So
what's that?
It's stuff I've never heard before.
Okay.
So it's like watching the movie brand new again.
Yeah.
Well, when we were halfway through, I thought, "Oh man, this is going to go on for another like 6 hours," and then suddenly we were at the end. I was like, "Oh, that was cool. Like that was a nice final stretch." But thank you for indulging me. It was fun, and now I don't have to watch Alien 3 for another 10 years. It's great.
Well, again, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for listening. And be sure to check out perhaps our commentary for Blade Runner, which Charles has graciously suggested he come on and talk about the final cut. So we will be back with you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
To find out more information about Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please go to www.perfectorganism.com. If you would like to support the show, please go to www.perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.